Okay. Um, Okay, good evening. This is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, a little after 6 p.m. It's a meeting of the Medfield Zoning Board of Appeals. Sitting tonight is the Comprehensive Permit Granting Authority for the town of Medfield to hear the application, or to begin to hear, there'll be many hearings, for 86 Plain Street LLC for a comprehensive permit under Chapter 40B, the Mass General Laws, for a project at 86 Plain Street in Medfield. I'm Jack McNicholas, Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The sitting members tonight, along with me, are Christine Barton and Jared Gustafson, and we will be the three voting members. Also sitting tonight, who will participate in all respects unless the applicant has any objection in the process, and we do this in the event that one of the three of us for some reason can't attend a hearing, or God forbid something worse, and we could use the Mullen Rule to go back and listen to the hearing and try to make up, but we found that it's helpful, and we've actually used it once or twice to substitute in the fourth member if one of us can't be there. So absent any objection,
No
Counsel?
objection.
Okay, good. So that will be the process. Also with us tonight, Maria De La Fuentes, who most of you folks out there have communicated with, I think, Director of Land Use and Planning for the town of Medfield. She is also the kind of overseer and coordinator of this whole process, is our technological expert. And we'll keep the virtual part of this meeting going. And I will mention right now that because the remote provisions of the open meeting law were extended, the governor signed the bill last Friday, extending the remote provisions through June 30th of 2027. So all future hearings will be fully remote, which means everyone will have a comfortable seat. Okay? And it's also easier for a lot of these folks that have traveled a great distance to be here, and also for all of you that you don't have to deal with home situation. So that will be it going forward. Also with us tonight is our technical advisor and consultant, Paul Haverty, Attorney Paul Haverty. He has been active in the field of land use and is very well versed in the 40B process. He has worked with this board on numerous occasions on other 40B projects in the town, and we basically look to him for guidance throughout the entire process. So we ultimately are making the decision, but we are very, very dependent upon the technical guidance from Paul. The statute 40B, as he's going to explain to you, is very technical in nature, and while the board has a lot of, not discretion so much as, we take the place of all the town boards in this process. At the same time, there are restraints on what we can and can't do relative to the project. So Paul helps to keep us on the straight and narrow on that. I will also note for the record, before we read the legal notice, that the application was filed, feedback from this thing, but I'll get used to it. It's on there. Anyway, the application was filed on February 28th, 2025, and under Chapter 40B, the general requirement is that the hearing must be open within 30 days of the filing of the application. At the point that the applicant was ready to file, Maria and I had some back and forth with the applicant relative to this board being involved with the redrafting of the accessory dwelling unit bylaw for the town and some other projects, and it just wasn't going to be feasible to open a hearing in March. So with agreement of the applicant, and we do have the letter in the record, and speaking with Maria De La Fuente of your office, she has confirmed that the hearing regarding the application will be opened April 2nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. Please consider this email our client's approval to extend the 30-day period by which the ZBA must open the meeting to April 2nd, 2025. So for the record, that 30-day period was extended, so we're opening this and we have a valid meeting. With that, Christine, if you could read the
Sure.
legal notice, please.
I may, I know there's an echo here. I'm trying to figure out how we can shut up the echo, Katie.
Where is it coming from?
The little, yes.
I didn't see that. So I'll have to turn off my audio, but those on Zoom might not hear it. But maybe they're hearing.
They can hear that. Yes, I tested it.
Okay, great, thank you. It should be okay now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Otherwise, it was going to be a really long night.
Yes, yes, sorry, I wanted to make sure we got that out of the way. I know that people on Zoom can hear us because the microphone is turned on this room, and I tested it to the back as well, so it's clear. Can you hear us from the recording too? Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Jack, maybe you need to speak up a little louder so you can hear back there.
All right.
Thank you.
I will try. We were just saying, this is, well, Christine's been on the board for
I think it's
2-3 years.
Yeah, and this is
We
my
met
first
each other in person
I know, for the first
coming
time
in the
tonight.
elevator. So, one of the good things that comes out of the pandemic is we could all do things remotely, so bear with us as we get used to doing one here in person. And I will try to speak up. I'm sorry, I tend to lower my voice. So I can hear my mother saying, lower your voice. A long time ago. Okay, legal notice.
Notice is hereby given that the Medfield Zoning Board of Appeals will conduct a hybrid public hearing at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025 at the Medfield Townhouse, Trenery Hall, second floor, 459 Main Street, and online via Zoom on an application for a proposed development known as 86 Plain Street, 40B Winder Estates from Delphic Associates LLC, the applicant with respect to property located at 86 Plain Street, Assessor's Map 6, Lot 9, RT zoning district with no aquifer overlay. So total land area is 647,480 square feet or 14.86 acres. The application is for a comprehensive permit under Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, Sections 20 through 23, as amended, to allow the construction of 24 single-family homes. The final development will be for home ownership, non-age restricted dwellings with appurtenant driveways, parking areas, landscaping, utility systems, stormwater management system, and/or access and utility easements as required. There will be 6 affordable units at 80% AMI and 18 market rate units. This meeting will be held in a hybrid format. The zoning board will attend in person, and members of the public may attend in person. In addition, members of the public who wish to participate via Zoom may do so by joining through the link posted on the agenda on the town website. The applications and plans may be viewed on the ZBA's webpage on the town's website at www.town.medfield.net. John J. McNicholas, Chair, Zoning Board of Appeals. This legal notice was printed in the Hometown Weekly on March 13th, 2025 and March 20th, 2025.
Thank you. Just a hopefully very quick overview of how we will be conducting tonight's hearing and series of hearings going forward. Basically, we're going to start with, I'm going to ask Maria to just give a quick summary of the procedure that some of you are also already somewhat familiar with, of how we will take written input, be it from the members of the public who have submitted a number of things, or things that are communicated from the applicant team, or from Tetra Tech, or for anyone else from that matter, so that we are maintaining a permanent record. And Maria will explain how we're going to continue to handle that, and just a few little things to be aware of if you're submitting anything. After that, Paul is going to give us a PowerPoint presentation, which is really, really helpful for the board, hopefully for the applicant and council, and also for all of you. This may be your first venture through 40B. As I said, it's a technical process, and Paul's going to give us an overview of how the process works and kind of what can and can't be done within the framework of the 40B. After that, tonight, with those introductions, then we're going to turn it over to the applicant team to give a presentation and an overview of the entire project. Keep in mind that all of us are hearing about this really for the first time. We have the application, we have a traffic report, and we have a letter from Tetra Tech that responds to the traffic report, but we all try to make it a practice. I know there's been some prior discussions and meetings and hearings with various boards relative to prior projects on this site. I know for myself, and I think the rest of the members of the board, we have sort of intentionally stayed away from and out of all of that because I think it allows us to do our job better coming in to this meeting knowing little or nothing about a project. So we're all going to learn tonight at the same rate that everyone else will. So we will have a presentation, a complete overview of the project. From there, we will open it up to questions, if there's any questions or immediate concerns from the board. And again, this is all in the general sense. We will then ask if there are any representatives of town boards or town officials who are here tonight that would like to speak briefly in the first meeting, again, with general questions or concerns about the project. The idea is to get everything on the table so we know what we're starting with so that we can then move forward through the process. So it'll be this board, then it will be town boards and officials, and then we'd also ask Steve Booley and, sorry, Steve, I'm drawing a blank on your colleague's name. Courtney, who are both, Courtney is the traffic expert, and they're both here tonight when we get into the traffic study, hopefully later in the meeting. But if either of you have any general, particularly overviews and questions or concerns about the project, and then we will open it up to the public. Now, we have a lot of people here. A lot of people have expressed opinions, and some of them very well documented with pictures and other evidence, so to speak. And we encourage you to submit those, your concerns in writing. My goal is always to give everyone that wants to speak an opportunity to speak. Not everyone is going to speak at length tonight about the whole project, because we will have a series of hearings, at least 2 or 3 more, where we will deal with particular topics. Tonight, we're going to hopefully get into the traffic aspects and those concerns. If we don't finish that tonight, then we'll start the next meeting with that. Then we will get into the site plan, stormwater, the environmental issues. Those are the 2 major concerns. So I would just ask, when we open it up for initial questions or comments tonight, if you want to make a comment, please do. But try to limit it just to the general overview. If you're opposed for this reason, this reason, this reason, that's fine. Then we'll get into the details as we get to later phases in the project. So again, everyone will have an opportunity to speak. If we get to a point where it's repetition of the same thing, we may, need to cut that off just in the interest of time. So understand we're trying to be fair and, make use of everyone's time, at the same time, give everyone an opportunity to be heard. And I know I don't have to say this to a bunch of wonderful Medfield and Walpole people who may be sitting here, and to anyone else, but please, number one, any questions or comments are directed through the board to the applicant. It's not a give and take out there where we sit back and pop a Diet Coke and watch, okay? And at the same time, please with one another. If there are differing points of view, express them, be passionate, but let's be civil and courteous with everyone. I know I didn't need to say that, but, okay. So with that, Maria, can you just give us a quick overview on the procedure for
Yes.
submitting written materials? Thank you.
Yes. And just to add to your last point, when people wish to speak, Mr. McNicholas will make sure that, you know, it's clear when the public period comment is starting. But if you could please go to the podium so we can get all your feedback, that would be amazing. So it'll come up nice and clear in the recording. So with that,
And also, your name and address.
yes, thank you.
And if you are affiliated with any town board or department and are speaking in that capacity, also that.
Yes, thank you,
Thank
Jack. So our policy on written correspondence, to ensure that all resident concerns are appropriately documented and considered during the zoning board of appeals review process, we encourage the following policies to the submission of written correspondence. Residents and interested parties are strongly encouraged to submit written correspondence regarding matters for the CBA. Their comments are particularly helpful when the volume of public input may exceed the time available for oral testimony during a public meeting. We might not have the time tonight to go through every resident who might speak, but if you have sent a letter to the board has read it and is taking into consideration your feedback. The purpose of written correspondence is an important tool to ensure that the CBA and the peer reviewers are aware of community concerns as they arise. It also allows the development team to proactively address your concerns and bring materials at the meeting if possible to address said concerns. It provides a formal record of public input for consideration during project review and decision making, and it allows for a detailed and thoughtful comments that may not be possible to fully express during live meetings, which there may or may not be a time limit to express comments during live meetings, dependent on the volume of speakers. These letters should be addressed to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I know a lot of correspondence has come in addressed to town staff. If you could make the letter to the Medfield Zoning Board of Appeals or to Chair John J. McNicholas, the name is on the Zoning Board website. You can find the names of all Zoning Board members, or just Medfield Zoning Board of Appeals is great. You can email me said letter addressed to the board, or you can send me an email with an attached letter, and I will be happy to forward all comments. All written correspondence received will be shared with the zoning board members and the peer reviewers as applicable, as well with the development team, and will be included in part of the official public record.
Thank you. So with that, turn it over to Mr. Haverty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this works or not, but for the record, Paul Haverty, I'm an attorney with Blattman, Bobrowski, Haverty, and Silverstein out of Concord, Massachusetts. I'm here acting through a program from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. It's technical assistance program where they provide assistance to local boards who are hearing comprehensive permit applications. This is, I don't know, the 7th or 8th one that I've been in front of the board. I've been here so frequently, they actually have a nameplate for me. It's pretty cool.
We'll
So-
give you the gold watch that you
So what I've done in many of these hearings is begin with an overview of Chapter 40B to give the board a refresher as to what its role in the process is, and also to give the general audience an understanding of what the limitations are and what the requirements are when a board is hearing a Chapter 40B development. Next slide, please. So as an overview, a comprehensive permit is a master permit that subsumes all of the local permitting requirements. And what that means is that the Board of Appeals is actually sitting as all local boards and issuing all local permits and approvals as part of this process. That doesn't mean that they are superseding requirements under the state law. So for instance, the Conservation Commission retains all of its jurisdiction under the Wetlands Protection Act. The Board of Health retains all of its jurisdiction under Title V. And the building commissioner retains all of their jurisdiction over the state building code. However, where there are local rules that are stricter than the state rules, such as local wetlands bylaws, local septic rules and requirements, the Board of Appeals is the permit granting authority for those permits, and they are the ones that will act on the application. The way that Chapter 40B works is an applicant has the right to request waivers of local rules and requirements. And we will get into a little bit later what the board's obligations are as it relates to those waivers. But it is the right of an applicant to request that waivers of local rules and requirements be granted. In order for a project to be able to move forward, it has to qualify under the state requirements for affordable housing development. And in this case, when you're talking about a home ownership development, that means that a minimum of 25% of the units have to be affordable to households that are making not more than 80% of area median income. Next slide, please. So I'm going to run through these quickly because it's my understanding that there aren't any safe harbors that are applicable in this matter. But there are different safe harbor standards. There's those that are contained in the statute, and there are those that are contained in the regulations. So the statutory safe harbor, the one most people are familiar with, is the 10% housing unit minimum requirement. If a municipality has more than 10% of its year-round housing units restricted as affordable housing, then they can claim that as a safe harbor. There's also the 1.5% general land area minimum requirement, and that is based upon the total land area zoned for residential, commercial, or industrial use. And then the third provision is the 0.3% total land area zoned in a community for residential, commercial, or industrial use, or 10 acres. And quite honestly, I'm not aware of any municipality that's ever claimed this, or certainly that's successfully claimed it. Then there's regulatory safe harbor provisions. Housing production plan. So if a municipality has a housing production plan, they can claim safe harbor if they approve either 0.5 of your total year-round housing units. You get a 1-year safe harbor. And if you have 1% of your total year-round housing units that have been approved, you get a 2-year safe harbor. And the town of Medfield has benefited from this safe harbor multiple times in the past, and has used it to shape the types of developments that have come in. And it's allowed the town to move significantly from what was at one point a very low affordable housing percentage up to now closing in on the 10% total. The recent progress towards housing unit minimum safe harbor is a 12-month look back. If the town has approved 2% of its total year-round housing units in the prior 12 months, then you get a 1-year safe harbor. Large project safe harbor sets a limit on the size of projects that a particular municipality has to hear, and it's based upon the number of year-round housing units in that municipality. And then related applications, this was sometimes known as the cooling off period. And what it was designed to do was prevent an applicant from coming in with a non-40B application, getting feedback that was not positive from local boards, and then using Chapter 40B as a hammer to say, well, if you don't allow this, then we'll come forward and we'll do a 40B. So what this does is it makes an applicant have to wait for 1 year before they're allowed to file a 40B application after any portion of a prior approval remained pending. Next slide. So there are specific application requirements under Chapter 40B, and they're not the typical requirements for a 40A application. So there's 3 different statuses that an applicant can be. They can be either a public agency, a nonprofit, or a limited dividend organization. The most typical would be a limited dividend organization. In fact, a lot of nonprofit developments that move forward actually are done still as a limited dividend organization, just because of ease of sort of switching back and forth between types of organizations. Evidence of site control. So that could mean that they've got a deed and the property is already in their name. It could mean that they have a purchase and sale agreement, an option to purchase, anything that shows evidence that they have the rights to do what they're proposing to do on the site. And then finally, a project eligibility letter from a subsidizing agency. In this instance, there was a project eligibility letter that was issued by Mass Housing, which is one of the 4 qualifying subsidizing agencies. Next slide. Other 40B application submission requirements, preliminary plans versus final plans. So under Chapter 40B, because this is supposed to be a streamlined process, an applicant is not required to submit final design plans. They're only required to submit conceptual preliminary plans. Those plans have to include existing site conditions in a locus map. They're required to submit preliminary scaled architectural drawings, a tabulation of proposed buildings by type, size, and ground coverage, a preliminary subdivision plan if a subdivision is proposed, a preliminary utilities plan, and a list of requested waivers. Next slide. You can actually skip to the following one. So this is just a number of important dates in the process. So within 7 days of receiving a 40B application, the board should distribute the application to various town boards and other public entities. This is not a specific requirement in the sense that you're not going to wind up with a constructive approval if you don't distribute within 7 days, so that's more aspirational. Notice of public hearing within 14 days is very important, because if you don't do that, you can't open the public hearing within 30 days, which is a requirement that can lead to a constructive approval. In this instance, the board was able to get the agreement of the applicant to extend that 30-day period, which was to tonight, so the hearing is still being opened in a timely manner that will not lead to a constructive approval claim. After the board opens the public hearing, it has 15 days to provide safe harbor notification to the applicant. Presuming that there is a safe harbor that's applicable, the board submits that notification in writing. The applicant then has 15 days to appeal that safe harbor notification. And then it's actually now EOHLC has 30 days to respond and make a decision on that safe harbor claim. Within 180 days of opening of the public hearing, the board is required to close the public hearing. The board is required to render a decision within 40 days of closing the public hearing. In rendering that decision, all that means is that the board actually has to take a vote to either approve or disapprove. Once that vote is taken, then the board has 14 days to submit a written decision with the town clerk's office. And it doesn't matter when in the process that vote is taken. So if you close the hearing and the same night you vote on the matter, you have 14 days to submit your decision. You don't have the whole 40-day period any longer. Scheduling a site visit, conduct a site/neighborhood visit early in the review process. Help the board understand site and neighborhood existing conditions, the proposed site plan and building design, location of abutters who might be most affected by the proposed development. I do want to point out that the board needs to make sure it complies with open meeting law requirements as part of that site visit, which means that you cannot take testimony from the applicant, from any other party. The only type of information that you're allowed to take there is directional. For instance, this is where if the building is staked out, this is where the buildings are supposed to be. The roadway will be located here. Wetlands, are along the perimeter over here. That's fine. Other than that, there can't be any substantive conversations. Retaining peer review consultants. This board is very, very proactive about that, which I always appreciate. Employment of outside consultants could be civil engineering, traffic, architecture, financial, although that financial consultant aspect is subject to additional regulations. You can't retain a peer review consultant to review a pro forma, and you can't even really request a pro forma until all other peer review has completed. You've provided the applicant a draft decision that includes all of the waiver decisions and all of the proposed conditions. And the point of that is there's really no point to doing a pro forma review until you know what exactly the decision is going to be. And then the applicant can either inform the board that they're okay with the decision, in which case there's no need for a pro forma review, or that they believe that the decision would render the project uneconomic, in which case the board does have the right to engage in a pro forma review. Securing sufficient project information to make an informed decision. The board should be focusing on the real project issues, impacts early in the review process. Peer review should be commenced as soon as possible, which has occurred. If needed, request additional information from the applicant. Don't hesitate to ask for graphics that help clarify height, massing, setbacks, and overall relation to neighbors. Negotiations and work sessions. This is something that really varies from board to board, whether or not they're willing to engage in these. My recommendation is always that if the board wants to do a work session, that not more than one member of the board participate. In this instance, because you have a 3-person board, you couldn't have more than one person participate, because then it would be a quorum and you'd have an open meeting law violation. Neighbors can be invited to those work sessions. All discussions during the session, again, are advisory in nature. No decisions can be made. Must comply with the open meeting law, which includes any discussions. There should be notes taken during that workshop session. And the next meeting after that workshop session, the one board member who participated should be providing those notes to the board and having a discussion about them. So at the end of the day, the board needs to balance issues of local concern with the regional need for affordable housing. Local concerns are defined as concerns relating to health, safety, environmental, design, open space, planning, or other local concerns. So once the board does close the public hearing, it then enters into its deliberation session. The board at this point cannot take any additional information. I wouldn't recommend even allowing anybody to speak during this process, other than if there is some procedural point that needs to be made, simply because the board does not want to put itself in a position where there's a claim that it has not closed the hearing in a timely manner, because it essentially reopened the hearing by taking testimony during the deliberation session. So the board can discuss potential conditions as part of this and review the requested waivers. One thing that I would say, and I think that, the board has generally done this in the matters in which I've been involved, is to actually keep the hearing open, discuss a draft decision during an open meeting, which is absolutely within the board's right to do. And I think it's very advisable, because at that point, you can get feedback. You can get feedback from the applicant as to whether or not they believe that this, conditions are going to render the project uneconomic. You can get feedback from the public as to whether or not they think that the conditions are satisfactory to address their concerns. So it's beneficial to be able to have those conversations while the hearing is still open. That all depends on how quickly you're able to move through your process and get a draft decision ready. Drafting and issuing the comprehensive permit decision. The ZBA has 3 decision alternatives. Approve as submitted, and I literally have been doing this for more than 20 years. I've never seen that happen. You can approve with conditions, which is the typical result of a 40B application, or a board can deny the comprehensive permit. Approval with conditions. The conditions should not make the project uneconomic. Conditions and/or requirements must be consistent with local needs. And this is important. The board should not reduce the number of units for reasons other than evidence of local concerns within the board's purview. And the reason that one is important is if the board reduces the number of units in a manner not based on local concerns, an applicant may not even need, on an appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee, to prove that the board's decision rendered the project uneconomic. If they can just argue that there are no issues of local concern that support conditions that were imposed by the board, then they can have those conditions stricken without having to show that it renders the project uneconomic. Appeal of the decision. So appeals by the applicant go to the Housing Appeals Committee. Appeals for other aggrieved parties are made with the Superior Court or the Land Court. It's not uncommon for both appellate routes to occur. An applicant may, appeal your decision to the Housing Appeals Committee, while a group of abutters may appeal, pursuant to 4817 to the Superior Court or the Land Court. In that circumstance, the trial court is going to immediately stay the proceedings there to allow the Housing Appeals Committee process to be completed. If at the end of the Housing Appeals Committee process, the board's decision is changed in any manner, then the trial court appeal is rendered moot, and any appeals would have to be through the appeal of the Housing Appeals Committee decision.
So arguably our decision could be, one word to use, that both people are appealing.
It's not at all uncommon. Yes. And managing the comprehensive permit, this is really sort of inside baseball for the board, but as you're aware, once you issue your decision, you're not done with the permit. The applicant has to go through and get a regulatory agreement, deed rider, monitoring agreement, and most importantly, final approval from the subsidizing agency, which again, in this instance, would be Mass Housing. They also have to have an affirmative fair housing marketing plan approved. They have to have a lottery plan approved. They've got to get income, asset, and first-time buyer status and requirements met for the affordable units. You can include a condition in your decision as to when the comprehensive permit will lapse. That can't be less than 36 months. So every comprehensive permit decision has to be at least 36 months. You can make it longer if you choose. Transfer of the comprehensive permit that frequently occurs after approval. And the board does actually not get a say in whether or not it gets transferred. All it does is get notice from the subsidizing agency when that request has been made. I do also want to point out one final thing that the board is, I think, quite familiar with, which is even after the end of all of that, it's quite possible that an applicant will come in at a later date and seek to get the comprehensive permit modified. And that, the way that process works is the board has to make a determination as to whether or not the proposed modification is either substantial or insubstantial. If the board determines that it's insubstantial, then it's just automatically approved. No further action is required. If the board makes a determination that it's substantial, then it has to notice a public hearing within 30 days and basically go through the comprehensive permit process all over again. That's all I have. Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Paul? Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
welcome.
And as I said, we rely heavily on Paul's expertise. You can see from this presentation, he knows what he's talking about, and he deals with this all the time. We don't. So it's important, you know, in fairness to the applicant and in fairness to the community and all other interested parties that we receive and take the guidance necessary to try to do the best job we can for you. All right. I think that brings us to the part of the show where we turn it over to the applicants. So,
Sure. Well, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Attorney Steve Gard. I have offices in Hanover, Massachusetts, and I'm here.
Steve, I might just mention that I think that microphone is just for TV.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh, I'll do my best
just
to
so that everyone can hear.
enunciate better. Yeah. So again, I'm Attorney Steve Gard with offices in Hanover, Massachusetts. I've been practicing in Massachusetts for 32 years, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 86 Plain Street LLC. With me this evening is Paul Cousins from Delphic, our 40B consultant, Deb Keller from Merrill Engineering, our professional engineer, and Ian McKinnon, our traffic engineer from Howard Stein Hudson, or HSH. So as you all heard from the reading of the public notice, as well as the background information in your packets this evening, this project is a 40B project located at 86 Plain Street in this town. Project of eligibility letter was issued by Mass Housing on December 10th, 2024, approving the site for a 40B project. The site itself consists of 14.86 acres of land, 6.6 of which are uplands for a 24 single-family home development, where 6 of those single-family homes will be allocated for affordable dwelling units applicable to the town of Medfield's SHI. On the site, there exists presently a single-family home of approximately 3,925 square feet, a barn, and fenced fields and paddocks used to be for livestock. Those structures will be removed in order to make way for the development. None of those structures will remain. The property is located in the residential town zoning district with 185 feet of frontage on Plain Street. So that's the basic. I just wanted to give everyone a summary of that. This evening, we're going to try to give you a brief overview of each component of the process of the project, and with a focus at the end on the traffic. That's according to Maria's kind guidance. The traffic is the first item on the bucket list that we need to address, and Ian will be here to do that. We have that you have in your packet that has been submitted a traffic report from HSH. Tetra Tech has given us a comment, a preliminary comment, I would call it. I don't think it was a full, complete analysis, but they gave us a preliminary comment so that we could have an opportunity to address those. We have addressed those in a memo, which we aren't ready to give to you yet because we haven't finalized it. But Ian is here to talk both about his traffic report as well as the peer review traffic comments as well. So with that, I'll let Paul take you through the procedural history of the project, at least to get us to here. Take a few minutes just so that everyone, for your benefit as well as the benefit of the folks in the audience, what we've gone through to get the project to this point. That, if it pleases the chair.
That's fine.
Thank you.
The
Paul?
chair is easily
Take
placed
it
at
away.
this hour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Cusson. Our firm is called Dolphic Associates, and we're located in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I personally have been involved in affordable housing for over 30 years, and I've known Attorney Haverty for 25 years maybe or so. I agree with everything that Attorney Haverty has said. He's done a very good job in the overview and took a lot of my stuff I was going to say about it as well. So he has done an excellent job. But however, a couple of things that can touch upon. Our firm also, in addition to being experts in the area of 40B, we also do the affirmative fair housing marketing plan and conduct the housing lottery, which that process has got to be approved also by Mass Housing to start going through that process. And one of the things Paul did not touch upon, a lot of people say to me, well, why are you before the Zoning Board of Appeals? Why aren't you before the Planning Board? 40B specifically gives the Zoning Board of Appeals the statutory authority to hear under 40B, to hear an application for affordable housing. So what we ended up doing is when we got our plans together and so forth, and I discussed it with Mass Housing before submitting an application to them. And back in August of 2024, we submitted what's called a site eligibility application to Mass Housing, and which consisted of exactly what is before the board here, which is 24 single-family homes to be owned in a form of condominium. And we went on to talk about, we gave them a copy of the proposed architectural plans. A lot of the information you have before you tonight was also submitted to Mass Housing as part of that site eligibility process. And at that time, when we submitted to Mass Housing, a copy was also of the application, similar to the book that I've given to all of the board members, was also submitted to the Board of Selectmen. And they had, Mass Housing typically will ask the board to respond to their comments within 30 days. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, but if there's an extension, I'm not sure whether an extension was granted in this particular case. So the Board of Selectmen had talked to a number of different boards in town and issued their concerns to Mass Housing. And so Mass Housing took into consideration all of those comments. Mass Housing then, which they required, conducted a site visit. So Mass Housing came out at the site and invited town officials, and I don't think anybody from the Zoning Board of Appeals attended that meeting, but members of, I think it was a member of the Planning Board, a member of the Board of Selectmen, the fire chief, the police chief, the DPW, a number of neighbors and so forth. So there were many people, I think we had about, I don't know, 12 to 15 people who, were you at the site too?
Yes.
Okay.
There's actually meeting notes I took that are up on the website for the Plain Street 40B project. If anyone wants to find what was said, they're up there.
So Mass Housing asked a number of questions. They want to get an idea of where the housing was going, how many units, and walk the site. And later on, they also, looked at the neighborhood. They wanted to know more about the project. So after the site walk was issued, they then issued a site eligibility letter, which approved our application, which gives us the ability, as Paul had indicated, to file a request for a comprehensive permit. And they issued, I think Steve indicated, they issued the site eligibility letter on December 10th, 2024. And so with that approval, we then submitted the application, and here we are today. One of the things I did want to say is that if it's a possibility that the town could set aside up to 70% of the affordable units for local residents. And sometimes that's important to a board and important to the town, that some folks who live in a town can't afford to live here or have an opportunity to, people who work in a town could qualify to be considered local, if they live in a town. So that's an important component that you should be aware of. The town presently, Paul had indicated that they're going to be less than 10%. They're at about 8.7%, I think is where the town sits now on the state subsidized housing inventory. And
Higher.
8.87?
8.87.
Like 9.4. It's been updated. We're 25 units short.
Okay, but it hasn't been published. It's on the, but whatever, it's still under 10%. And the prices, the area median income was just changed yesterday. And you're aware of that. So we submitted those numbers to our staff. And we did some quick calculations, and just to give you an idea, we're proposing basically 3-bedroom homes and a couple of 4-bedroom units. And it's all of that calculation is based on Title V, and Deb will get into that. But so we think the pricing for the 3-bedroom for the affordable units would be $334,300 versus the market rate units, which would be over $1 million. And the 4-bedroom would be about $362,000. Is based on the most recent published AMI. If we go to, and that's dependent upon interest rates and a number of calculations. Basically, what they say is that someone who's at 80% of median income cannot be spending any more than 30% of their income for housing that includes interest rates, HOA fees, and other fees, and we do a calculation to come up with that price. So at this point, I'd be glad to answer any questions anyone may have on the lottery process, on the affirmative fair housing marketing plan, or in general, just 40B. And if I can't answer, I'm sure Paul can.
What would the market rate be on the 4-bedroom?
I think we have about $1.6 million in the pro forma.
And the 3-bedroom?
The 3-bedroom, I think, was about $1.4 million.
Yeah, I think it was $1.4 million.
Yeah. And of course, those are all subject to market conditions, that could go up or down. Whatever the market will bear at that time for that particular property is what we would sell them. And 25% of the units have to be set aside for low and moderate income housing. And just to give you an idea, this is not, some people think that this is a Section 8 housing program. And Section 8 housing is a great program, and we participated in Section 8 housing. But it's a different market, and that's not what this is. So just to give you an idea, the affordable, the area median income presently that we would base all the numbers on for Medfield is $160,900. So someone making $160,900 household income could qualify for the affordable housing.
80% of that, Paul.
No,
80%
yes,
of the
80%.
80% of the
Well, it's
160.
adjusted for family size. When you
Right.
look at the chart, it'll give you the exact.
Yeah, but
the
it's
exact
80%.
numbers, but the area median income is 160,900. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
So I'm going to substitute for the architect, and I wanted to just, because he couldn't make it this evening, so I'll give a very brief overview. In your packet are architectural elevations and renderings for the homes that we intend to build at this particular site. There are 3 different house styles, as with most developments you get to choose. They all range in size from 1,812 square feet to about 2,636 square feet. They all will have a 2-car attached garage. They will all have unfinished basements and unfinished attics for, storage and whatnot. Some models will have the master bedroom above the garage with a suite, like a master bath with a suite. Other models will have that area left open for storage and future improvements if the owner would like to do that. What we as a team came to the conclusion that, there is, as you can see, tremendous resistance to 40B projects. And I think that what we're trying to do is, in our development, in the sites that we choose, in the towns in which we choose them, we are trying to put in under 40B location appropriate developments. Instead of putting a single building with, 90 apartments in a rural town like Medfield or Marshfield or something like that, we're proposing this single family home style development. It's our contention that that there is a lack of single family home housing for people who want to achieve the American dream. We have other projects that we are involved in that we are trying to promote the starter home concept under 40Y. Under 40Y. And we are in the process of trying to create a middle class housing. These houses are difficult to afford for the market rate, and some people can't qualify for the affordable units. We understand that dilemma. But we feel that this type of architectural design is more fitting to a location like a suburb type town like Medfield. It is much more costly to build units like this. It is not as efficient, as you can see, and it certainly isn't necessarily as favored by the state because you render fewer units in that regard. You can't put as high of density in a location such as this as you could if we decided to do like an apartment building, which is, much more policy driven to help cure the housing crisis in Massachusetts. So those are the homes that we have proposed in your packet. They are, designed so that the affordable units obviously can't be seen differently from any other market rate units. The affordable units are spread throughout the neighborhood as was vetted through Mass Housing, and that's that. Each unit will have its own driveway, and there'll be an open space in the middle of the sort of roundabout area for recreational purposes as well. So with that, I would ask Deb, our civil engineer, to kind of walk you through the plan.
Just, before that, the copies of the architectural plans that Steve was referring to is in tab 7 of your book.
Yeah. Thank you. And if it pleases the chair, Deb could walk you through the site plan so everyone could get an idea of how the site lays out.
Yes.
Yeah, if you can. We
I
have
got it.
boards. Oh, good, okay.
I'll just stand up. It doesn't hurt to put boards out if you wish, but I do have it and I can put it up on the screen.
I need these to see the screen.
Tab 7.
Of my book?
I got it. Let me just download. Let's see.
The plans are also in tab 7 that Deb will be referring to.
Steve, one question while we're getting
Yeah,
technical. Shoot. The,
That's tab 7.
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you.
Is it? Oh.
oh, Are these going to be individually owned homes with their own lots, or is this going to
Yeah.
be
Well, not with their own
a
lots.
condominium
Right.
concept?
So it'll be a condominium concept on a single lot, the whole property, but there'll be exclusive use areas that will surround each house so that
Right.
they'll have their own yard and their own
Will
privacy.
ultimately be a condominium.
Yeah, that's the way we decide to manage the whole complex. And you could do an HOA if we did separate lots, but in this case, we're going to do exclusive use areas. And that's mainly driven by Title V. It's 6 to 1, half a dozen of another, but because the
So
way,
they would be designed to be
yeah,
condominium, and I'm sure we'll get into this with the site plan, but the access road
Yep. Yeah.
going in.
common area.
Is that going to be part of the development, or is that going to be a town road like a?
No, this road will never be a town road. Yeah, it'll be a condominium or HOA
driveway.
style driveway that'll be maintained by them, responsible 100% by them. It will not be a town road.
Thanks.
Welcome.
So good evening. My name is Deb Keller with Merrill Engineers and Land Surveyors. As Steve, we do have our main office in Hanover, and I have been a licensed engineer for over 30 years, working on site developments similar to this one. Sure, sorry. Not working.
It's
All
just for the TV, so.
Just for
Oh,
the
all right.
TV.
I'll,
Check, fine.
thank you. I'll speak louder.
Use your outdoor voice.
Okay. So, as noted, the project is proposed at 86 Plain Street. If you could go to, yes, thank you. So this is the existing conditions plan where we have identified and field surveyed the property, which, as mentioned, is approximately 14.86 acres. We have had a wetland scientist locate wetlands on the property and surrounding properties, and have located the existing home, the outbuildings, the open pasture fields, and topography of this property. Next page, please.
One more?
One more, please. Yes, thank you. So as proposed, it's 24 single-family homes. The property will be accessed from Plain Street through a divided driveway, so it would be one way in, one way out. The main portion of the driveway follows the existing driveway that's currently developed on the property until you come into the upland. That first unit, as you come into the open area, is approximately where the existing dwelling is, where Maria's got her cursor. Yep, perfect. All good. So, as mentioned, the driveway is a 20-foot wide driveway with 1-foot Cape Cod berms. Each dwelling has individual driveways with 2-car garage, and we've provided space for 2 parking spaces within the driveway for visitor parking as well. And as we move into the site, we have included an internal sidewalk so that there's pedestrian access throughout the central portion of the property, as well as being able to access that central green space as mentioned. When we go to utilities, we can start with stormwater. We worked to design a stormwater management compliant system, which consists of a wetland basin up in the island that you see at the entrance. Moving into the site, we then have 3 subsurface chamber systems located right at the first development there, right on the bend where the cursor is. Yep. And then one in the upper, where you see that dashed box. Yep, right there. That would be the second drainage system. And then in the bottom right hand is a slightly smaller drainage system. So we've spread it across the site so that we could match existing conditions to the extent we can with the development. The drainage will be able to treat and attenuate the increase in runoff from the development. As for additional utilities, the wastewater treatment plant will be excuse me, I apologize, not a treatment plant. It is a shared system, Title V compliant system, which is the dashed rectangle that you see in the central island, which will support all of 24 homes from a Title V septic system. It is anticipated no gas in Plain Street, so no gas services will come into the site, and primarily electric services to the homes. And I believe that's sort of part of building code too. Not my purview, so can't really speak to that. That is the main focus of the civil portion. And I will pass it off to, unless there's any questions for me at this point, I will pass it off to Ian to speak more focus on the traffic. That works.
I'll just add one note as far as the site plan goes. We did receive a notice of intent for a wetland crossing. That's what you see, that little road, the little road. It's on C4.1. Yeah. And that was just so that we could get to that upland area and do perk tests for that. So
This is it, right?
if people were wondering what that was all about, that area will not be developed for anything. It's just the reserve area for the septic system.
Okay.
Yeah. Did I sufficiently identify where I was talking about, Maria?
Yes,
Okay.
it's this area right here. You said you received a notice of intent?
Yeah, an order of conditions. We filed a notice of intent and an order of conditions, which was,
an RDA.
I'm sorry, a negative
That's what I- okay.
determination.
I
I'm
was like,
sorry.
I didn't remember, and no, I
Yeah,
didn't.
I thought it was so it was a negative determination under an RDA, so we could make that crossing, get up there and do the test pits.
Okay.
When we do file with Concom for a notice of intent, it will include that access, the notice of intent, because we have to be able to get there, at some point, not anytime soon, but we anticipate including that in the notice of intent.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions on the drainage?
Are we saving all of our questions, or how are we handling this? Are we going to?
I was just looking for the overview, but I mean,
Yeah,
you
Yeah.
should
just
ask.
go through your entire
Yeah.
presentation.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
what-
we'll ask
And we'll go
questions.
back and talk on topic areas.
I think the idea was to go through and give you folks an overview so everybody got their bearings. And then I think after Ian does the traffic, we'll focus on traffic tonight. I think that's really what
That's,
we were.
yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah.
All right.
So it'll be the overview on traffic, then we'll have questions on the overview of the project.
Sure.
And then we'll get specifically to
Perfect.
a deep dive on the topic of traffic
Right.
and safety. Okay.
All right. Good evening, Chair and board members. My name is Ian McKinnon. I'm a professional traffic operations engineer with Howard Stern Hudson in Boston. Our firm's been in business for 38 years. We're a full-service traffic and civil engineering and highway engineering firm. So tonight, I'm going to give just a quick overview about the traffic study that was submitted as part of the comprehensive application in February. The study was dated actually October 2024. I'm going to go with sort of a high level. If there's any sort of traffic questions, I know we're all drivers in the room. We all understand a little bit about traffic, but if there's anything specific the chair or the board or anyone else would like to ask, I'm happy to answer any questions. So I also wanted to recognize too, we did receive some peer review comments from Tetra Tech. I'll hit upon a couple of those items, but understand that we have a response in the works and that we're just starting the formal response to that, but we have a letter drafted that will be submitted later. So the traffic impact study itself was done in accordance with Mass DOT traffic impact assessment guidelines. It's the sort of the state and industry standard for how a traffic study is completed throughout any sort of jurisdiction in the state. In particular, this project had 5 study area intersections, those being at Plain Street and the site driveway, the existing driveway that is, Plain Street at Briar Hill Road, Granite Street at Kittredge Road, Granite Street at Lincoln Road, and Plain Street at High Street, which is State Route 27. Typical with a transportation study, you want to get an assessment of existing conditions. And so the project actually did an existing conditions review. We collected some traffic count data. We did 2 sets of traffic count data. We did turning counts, which are how many people are taking lefts and rights, throughs at every intersection. We do that during the peak hours. those being the morning and the afternoon commuting hours. And then we also do a longer count that incorporates several days so that we have an average count of data. And we did that on Plain Street. That was at the end of April 2024 into May while school was in session. We typically, when we use this data, we try to create an average condition throughout the year. April and May tend to be actually higher than average months. And so typically you would, if you wanted an average day, you might reduce that because it's a higher than average day, whereas it's December or some of the winter months are actually lower traffic volumes. And so you're trying to design and incorporate an average day. We didn't do that in this case. We held our volumes or kept them high for a conservative approach to represent sort of maybe the busiest time of the year. The study also did a safety data review. And what I mean by that is we looked at crash data. These are all reportable crashes that come in through the police department or state police or any other sort of police jurisdiction. Those are reported. The state organizes them and releases this information, and we did a review of them at all the study area intersections. Those we looked back at five years back, and we're trying to look for any sort of trends or what sort of types of activity that may involve some sort of safety risk at any of the intersections. It's good to know that in these cases, almost all of these intersections have almost zero crashes throughout the year. There are some years where there's absolutely no crashes at any of these intersections. The rates themselves are almost half the average rate of what we typically see for MassDOT District 3 and District 5, those regional districts for unsignalized intersections. The conclusion I would draw from that is that there's no current sort of safety trend that we can, or negative safety trend that we can conclude on. We did solicit the towns of Medfield and Walpole for area developments. When we do a traffic study, we start with sort of the existing condition. We take in effect all other projects that are in the works to make sure that we're all layering on project impacts so that there isn't a conclusion that we didn't represent something that was already in the works. So we did look at that. There were two studies that were identified, or two other developments that were identified, and they were captured with a 1% growth rate because they were not close enough to the site that you would actually have to represent them on an actual trip basis. I will also say that we also contacted both towns again recently on a comment from the peer review consultant to see if anything has changed since October, and concluded there was not. There are other projects, but they're too far away to be represented in here, since Plain Street itself, which is a local jurisdiction roadway, wouldn't be on a typical commuting route for those developments. We also did a build-out scenario of 7 years into the future and accounted for any sort of other background growth that may happen in the next 7 years, and those were grown at a 1% compound rate as well. So the trips themselves for the project, we tend to forecast based on industry data. This is data from throughout the United States for this type of land use, and in this case, single-family detached housing. The study indicated that there would be a total of 226 trips per day. And what that means, and I think everybody may not appreciate what a full trip is. If you are coming and going out to sort of grab some groceries at the local market, that's a trip in and a trip out. So it's not necessarily, so that counts as 2 trips. So when I say 226, it's actually 113 in and 113 out. And that's for a daily total. When we look at just the peak times.
Was that the daily total for the new?
For the new
development?
New development, yes. When we take a look at just the commuting periods, which is really the time that we try to focus on, is when is everybody else driving on the road where there might be an impact at the same time. The busiest time period for this is the afternoon, where there'd be 22 trips forecasted. Of those, 14 would be entering, 8 exiting. So that amounts to 1 vehicle every 4 minutes entering, or 1 vehicle every 7.5 minutes leaving the site. Site access, as I mentioned, and Deb kind of hit upon it, is off Plain Street, which is a local road under Medfield jurisdiction. There is anticipated or proposed an in and an out. We recognize there's some comment on that as well. And so we'll propose to explore other solutions for this, the driveway condition. And I'll hit upon that in a minute. Each unit will have 2 off-street parking spaces, as I mentioned. Loading, service, trash, all of that stuff will happen on site itself, and they'll be accommodated on the new interior development street. Move in, move out, those types of activities are very rare. So, you know, the service and types of trucks on a development like this are very minor. What we did after we did the trip generation, those numbers, the forecast that I just referenced, is we try to distribute them. Where are people going to go? Where do they typically are driving? And so we use census data and journey to work data to project that. And the traffic study indicated approximately 72% are going to go north for sort of a daily commuting type of regime, and then 28% south. So north being towards downtown Medfield, those towards 109 and 495, and then to the east, Walpole, Route 1, 95, etc. And then south towards Norfolk and Route 1 South and 95. So we did a capacity analysis. That's really like, what does the operation say? If you're adding all these trips, what does that mean? And so we did that, like I said, with and without the project. That's called a no build and a build condition. We did that for all intersections that I mentioned in the study area. And what we concluded that they'll similarly operate what they do today. Typically we look at how many extra vehicles, how long is the delay, how many extra cars. It's really not a noticeable impact. So our sort of opinion is that there's adequate capacity at those intersections. The one that I did want to flag is the Plain at High and Route 27 intersection. In the morning, the build condition will, after the development, will be at 70% capacity. And in the afternoon, which is the higher or busier time of the day, it'll only be at 0.25% with queues of 20 feet or approximately 1 vehicle length on average. There was also a comment on site distance, and I know we'll probably get into that a little bit more. I think we're still refining.
Want to stay
Yeah,
just in the overview at
Sure.
this point, because I want to open it up for questions.
so yeah, with that, I'm
Then we'll get the deep dive into traffic.
sure. So with that, I'll stop right there. I think that's a good summary of the traffic impacts and studies. So if with that, I can answer any questions at the end. And thank
We'll
you.
be back to you. Anything else to be presented in the general overview?
No, I think that was what we had intended to give you. I think those are the, the main points that of concern, of course. I think you have a good handle on what we're proposing at the site this time. So.
Questions, Christine?
Yeah. So what is the right-of-way width on Plain Street? I don't see it on the plan. Do we know what that right-of-way width is?
I believe it's identified as a variable width. So you would, it varies as you move along Plain Street. So it looks like it's wider at the intersection.
So like in terms of feet, we're talking about 20 feet, 15 feet?
One up there, yeah. No, we want to see what they say first. Okay. Oh, I know you guys are prepared.
I would have to scale the plan to confirm that for you and we can provide you the width at the frontage, but it does vary.
And it looks like two means of egress and ingress and egress are split by a triangle. So the ingress looks like it's the location of the current driveway.
That is
That's the
correct.
current driveway. And then the egress, so it's right, one way in, one way out. The egress is further down toward the lot, the northern lot line. And that width looks like so 15 feet. And then the site access drive expands to about 20 feet as you go down.
Yes, that's correct. Both the individual entryway and exit lanes proposed are 15 feet wide. As those two lanes merge together, it becomes a 20-foot wide drive.
And And is that drive, as you come down around the circle, is that a one-way drive or is that two ways?
That-
I mean, it's 20 feet around the whole access drive, and I'm thinking, you know, a standard parking space is 9 feet, so then you have, you know, two cars coming down, it's just very, very tight.
Mhm.
And then as you make that turn, I guess one thing that I'd like to see is, has the fire department commented on that in terms of like a fire apparatus that fire trucks can get in, make that turn? Because when it goes, so Maria, can you bring up that site plan so I can show? I just want to make sure that a fire truck can come in if there is an
Make the
emergency.
turn.
And it just looks,
Yes.
you know, they're coming down.
Yep.
Can they make this turn back? Like, it just looks like it's a sharp turn. Can they make that turn, that right turn? The other thing that I'm concerned about, that I'd be interested in hearing about the fire department is, let's say there's something happening here. They come in and then they back out. I guess similar here with these dead ends.
Double down.
So you know, I think that we need to get the fire department to
Sure.
comment on safety.
So I believe that was one of the comments that asked for some turning movements. Obviously, we've done some in-house. I looked for them. They weren't in the initial package, but we're happy to provide that information. And then we can review those turning movements with the fire department.
Great. The other thing so you mentioned that there's sidewalks. So it looks like there's sidewalks on this interior kind of island. And then
Yes.
this little random sidewalk here. Given that these are gonna be 3 and 4 bedroom units with lots of families, there's like a bus shelter right there, so the school bus will come pick up the kids. Are they gonna be walking down the 20-foot drive with no sidewalk down to the bus stop? Is that the intention?
So the sidewalk that's internal was for internal circulation. I believe we felt as though that would be a discussion that we would have with the board as to if a sidewalk would be encouraged. Some people don't want them, some people do. So that was going to be a discussion,
Yeah,
topic of discussion, yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, you know, when they're walking to the bus stop
Sure.
and people are racing to work, you know, it's a 20-foot drive aisle, there's no sidewalk. That's not safe for the kids.
Sure. Definitely, and I think the bus location is also open because that will need to be coordinated with the school department as to where they would pick up. So that may come internally, and then you wouldn't need a sidewalk all the way out to Plain Street. So both of those things are,
Okay.
I think, working in progress.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I've discussed this preliminarily with the school department, and I think it's their general policy to do like street pickups for roads like this for dead ends. They don't usually go into the
Okay,
developments.
perfect.
But that is something that if you wish to confirm directly with them, I'm gonna make a list and I can send you the name of the contact that you should reach out to. But that is their general policy. When I show them the preliminary plans, that's what they told me.
Maybe we can convince them that it's not a dead end. You know, the bus can go in and go all the way around. Like, the cul-de-sacs are tough. You know, I live on one and the bus has to back up every day just because somebody left one trash barrel. You know,
We can dive deeper when we get to
Yeah.
the real site plan.
Yeah, just addressing the questions
Yep.
as best we can.
Yeah, I'm just
Uh,
kind of noting some of my
Yes,
concerns.
But the feedback is is good for us because we'll have these answers for you at the next meeting.
And I guess the waiver list, so I appreciate your waiver list, but I feel like it's very general. So like, for example, in the subdivision rules and regulations, you just reference a section. You know, like,
Yeah, but this is on a subdivision?
Yeah.
no, I know, but you need to get a waiver from the subdivision.
No,
No.
I don't think
Well,
so.
you don't need to get a waiver.
Only if they're requesting that the board approve a subdivision.
Right.
Then they would need to request specific waivers. But specific waivers of subdivision rules and regulations are not required when an applicant is not requesting a subdivision. The board can look to the subdivision rules and regulations as part of its imposition of conditions. So you can require compliance with certain provisions of the subdivision rules and regulations for roadway construction. things of that nature.
Yeah, because in our subdivision rules and regulations, they have a minimum road width of 50 feet. They have, a requirement that for 500 feet for no through, if you're not a through street, it's 500 feet and clear, so there, it's just not compliant with some of these.
Yeah, there again, this is not a subdivision, but typically what we do is that we comply with some of the construction standards of the subdivision rules and regulations. The thickness of binder course, the finish course, the underlayment course, all of those kinds of things. We would comply with that subdivision rules and regulations, even though it's not a subdivision. So the waiver list would not include waivers from the subdivisions.
Okay, but in some of the other ones where you are requesting waivers, what we'd like to see, and if the board agrees, more specific references to those local regulations where you are requesting waivers, and either like a justification or a reason why you cannot meet that particular requirement.
I'm confused
What?
because the waivers don't apply if it's not a in other words, the subdivision. rules
But
are-
I'm talking about like we're in
Yes,
charge
yes.
of the local wetlands bylaw, so there are waivers that you need under the the local wetlands bylaw.
Well, I was just referring to the specific subdivision control regulations that you have. They're not applicable to us, so we'll go back and look through the waiver list, but it doesn't, how can we articulate a waiver request for something that doesn't apply? That's what I'm getting at. Like, I think what Paul's point is, you may use that as a guide to place conditions on the permit, but it's not something that I can apply for as a
So-
waiver.
So let me address that. I'm just going to read from the regulations. If a project does not request a subdivision approval, waivers from subdivision requirements are not required. Although a board may look to subdivision standards such as requirements for road construction as a basis for required project conditions, in which case the applicant can seek waivers from such requirements. So you can seek to impose the subdivision standards, and then if you do that, the applicant can come back and say, we'd like waivers. As a general matter, I don't think your question just now was really going to the subdivision. You were going to waivers generally.
Generally for all of the.
And if I can clarify, first of all, I always push back on waiver requests to the extent that if there's a waiver request that's seeking a blanket waiver of, specific provisions, either zoning, wetlands, or whatever, I want to see defined exactly what is being waived and what is being proposed instead. And the reason is that it protects the board and it protects the applicant, because if there is an appeal filed by an abutter and this board is granting waivers that it's not aware of what the extent of those waivers is, then that decision becomes vulnerable to being arbitrary and capricious. So I always request more information as it relates to waivers. I want to see exactly what the waiver is that's being requested and what the proposed alternative is.
Thank you. You said that much more articulately than
But
I.
but
That's what
I do
meant
want to
say.
point out, the applicant cannot be required to provide an economic justification for its waivers. The way it works is if the board denies waivers and there's an appeal, the Housing Appeals Committee is going to apply the standard of whether or not there's an issue of local concern that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing. And that is applied in the aggregate, which is to say you look at all of the conditions that are imposed, all of the waiver decisions that the board makes. If in the aggregate they render the project uneconomic, then the board has to show an issue of local concern that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing. So it's not on a condition by condition basis.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So that is what I'm requesting. Paul just said it in a much more
And I think
articulate way.
we can do that. We'll expand on that a bit. In that regard, but also in our waiver list in the front of usually the beginning paragraphs, basically what we try to do is that, because many times if we're asking for every little waiver and we might miss something in some document, so what we typically say is that here's our list of waivers. However, what we're really asking for is whatever waivers may be necessary to build in the plans in accordance to what's been approved. So we'll be going through that process. There'll be several meetings, and we're going to get into the nitty gritty of what we're proposing. And so eventually, hopefully, you'll approve a set of plans. So that's what you're approving. In my opinion, you don't even need a waiver list, but that's,
No, and I appreciate
that's what
that,
I'm
and
trying to
that-
get to.
absolutely, because you need to protect yourself, so it is gonna be pursuant to the plans that we approve, but the waiver list that was provided as part of the application is just very broad.
right, we'll
It's just
take a look at it.
broad.
And if I could follow up on that, you do need a waiver list because it's specifically mentioned in the
I
regulation
agree. Yep.
that it's a required submittal. There is Housing Appeals Committee decisional law that states that waivers not specifically identified in the waiver list, but shown as necessary on the plans
Right.
are deemed to be approved. So one of the things you want to do in this process, particularly with regards to your peer review consultants, is to have them review the plans, review your local bylaws, make sure that there isn't something that's missed so that you can address as many of the necessary waivers as possible. Again, because failure to do so could be considered arbitrary and capricious.
Any other general questions, Christine?
So we'll take a look at that waiver list.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, we can come back to you if you're still thinking.
No, I mean, I can.
What is the split between 3 and 4 bedrooms?
I forget what the total number was.
My understanding is that we had two 4 bedrooms I'm sorry, in the total number of units, I don't know offhand. It has to do with the market conditions, and what we have to comply with, and Deb can help me out, is that we have a common septic system. And that common septic system cannot have any more than 10,000 gallons per day of flow. So a 3-bedroom home, for example, would have 330 gallons per day. So if we had all 4 bedrooms, for example, we'd be over the 10,000 gallons and we couldn't do that. So Title V is what really is going to drive that in addition to the market. So to say it's going to be so many 4s and so many 3s, it's really a condition of the market and Title
Oh,
V.
you have that, Deb, right? When you did your Title V, did we did a
we
did a
did it. We have the
calculation.
breakdown. It's really 90 bedrooms is your max. So, however you break that down,
So you'll be going to the Board of Health for the Title V
that is correct.
compliance.
It'll all be permanent.
Is there any,
There are more, to answer your question, there are more 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But it all washes out to 90 bedrooms.
So it's 90
The
bedrooms.
assumption that a quarter of all the 4 bedrooms will be affordable and the same with 3 bedroom? Or is that?
Yeah, we're gonna have, for example, if there were to be 4 bedrooms, one would have to be
Right.
unaffordable. If it's 1 or 2, maybe not, but, so that's, the affordables have gotta be distributed throughout the development, and we have an affordable housing distribution location plan, but they have to also represent the same types of units. And,
think the way we
and the whole test on the 40B is when you drive down the street, you're not supposed to be able to tell which ones are the affordable.
My recollection is when we did it, the affordables are going to be all 3 bedrooms, I think, because we didn't reach the threshold for an affordable to be required under the 4-bedroom, because we only had 2, I think, or 3, whatever that number was. But whatever we're required to do, Mass Housing's got to approve it, so it'll be, yeah. Within the
This might be a
limitation.
little in the weeds, but if we're talking about this as a condominium setup, essentially.
Yeah.
Are the HOA fees 25% reduced for the affordable housing?
Yeah, they have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to be reduced.
It's based on, there's 2 ways under the condominium law by which you can do this, okay? One is that everybody pays the same price. Or it's based on value. So if you're paying $900,000 for a market rate, my affordable is 300,000, your fees are gonna be 3 times as much as my fees. That's sort
That's
of,
the way we
that's-
based on the
right.
market value. The percentage interest in the condominium complex overall will be
Right.
based on its market value under the condominium statute. So they're going to be, by their nature, they're going to pay less.
Right, and if the condo, if the fees were all the same, then the sales of
Sales
the
price.
affordable units would go down because
Correct.
the sales price is based upon a formula, and one of the inputs in that formula is the condo fees.
yeah, there again, it's 30, of the AMI, 30%, someone cannot spend, when we do the pricing, 30% of their income for principal, interest, taxes, condominium fees, and so forth. So the higher the condominium fee, the lower the price would be, so that they fall within that 30%.
So there's an incentive for the developer to make the condominium fee lower.
Yeah, I think it's only fair. I mean, lowering the price for an affordable unit doesn't, it may help the person at the moment, but it doesn't help them on a monthly basis for cash flow and whatnot. So I think that's, you know.
Anything else? No?
I just have two quick ones. I just want to make sure, when we're talking about coming into development, and I believe it's gonna be 15 feet before they merge, and then 20 feet, is that what the driveway is currently, the size of that driveway, the width?
I think it's a variable driveway. There are portions that might be about 18 feet wide, so it is slightly
I
wider.
walk by that every day, just from an eye test.
Not at the entrance, but as you get in, it is slightly.
It's tight.
Yes,
I couldn't
yes.
Imagine.
That's existing.
That's existing.
That's not proposed.
No, if I, but
Right.
if I do,
Whoa.
If we do to do a sidewalk, obviously the sidewalk would not take away from that 20 feet, you would.
No,
add
you,
something to
you
it.
could not. It would be expanded from that 20. The 20 would be your travel lane. Yes.
And obviously, when we do the site visit, we'll see
Yep.
exactly what we're
Yep.
dealing with. I mean, I'm not walking down it, but it's an
Right.
eye test.
Yeah,
Scares
at
me a
the
little.
entrance, it's very narrow. It opens up a little bit as you
Okay,
come into the site, and it is variable driveway width.
And from a traffic standpoint, I had one quick question. Do we know rough estimate, how long a project like this would take from beginning to end? And has there been any traffic analysis for that period of time, from meeting all those construction trucks coming in, all that type of activity?
Oh, that's a condition of the market as to how long, but at 24 and this, it's probably a 2-year window.
So have we done any analysis on what that's gonna?
I leave that up to the traffic engineer to answer that question.
Can I go out of order there, Mr. Chairman?
We are gonna come back to traffic and.
Right.
I certainly can get you that information. We typically don't do that in a traffic study, but you know, it's certainly less than the final build condition.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to, obviously talking bigger vehicles and, yeah, as a board, I don't think we really care about if an accident happens before or during or after. We want to be safe at all
Oh,
times.
of
So
course.
I was just wondering if we had some type of analysis. If chair feels we don't need, that's fine. For those, that 2-year period, what would be happening on the street and what type of activity and what?
And many times also, it can be conditioned in the permit, you know, that no trucks entering like early morning school.
During
and
certain
that sort of
hours,
stuff,
yeah.
certain
Yeah.
hours. That's pretty
Or
typical.
certain parts of the year. I mean, there's all kinds of tools that we can use.
and the builder will, obviously whoever builds this for us will be, you know, will work with the inspectional services department to develop a construction sequencing plan.
Right.
And that'll help drive the traffic load and trucks and whatnot. And I'm sure that the zoning enforcement officer or the building inspector will have say in, you know, how that goes down. So, of a project of this size.
Thank you.
I want to come back to the traffic. I know you,
I just wanted to mention, we always recommend the applicants do a construction management plan
Yeah.
as part of the process, so
Sure.
that's something we will recommend.
Okay.
Thank you.
trying to maintain some flow to this, which is somewhat akin to herding cats, as the expression goes. All right, Christine, any other general
I mean, I
questions?
think it's good that what, the traffic engineer said that at least at the egress, most of the, like 3/4 of the turns will go right. So it's not like you're taking a left, because it is, that sight line distance is tough because it's downhill. There's a little bit of a bend in the road. I mean, when I drove by there, I kind of just was hovering at that current site drive, and it's tight. So I appreciate that you want to move it down to give it a little more of a you know, so that cars that they come pretty fast down, you know, they do come fast. And even though I believe in the report it said that the posted limit is 30, but the average is like 35, and I think that was one of the Tetra Tech that they said to do the analysis based upon the
Higher speed.
Yeah, we
the
do-
higher
yeah,
speed. So
we're on
so
it.
thank you.
Yep,
But you know, it is just
We'll have that analysis.
Okay.
And we'll have it in advance so that the folks at Tetra Tech can go over it with Ian too. They can kind of kibitz together about it before we
Great.
come to the next meeting and
Great. Great, thank you.
We hope within a
Because-
couple of days to be responding to Tetra Tech's comments, and
Perfect.
that'll help us develop it further.
Right, because the way we generally try to do this is between meetings. We're hoping for a lot of dialogue back and forth so that when we get to the next meeting, then we've reached some conclusions or stalemates, as the case may be, on various issues, and that helps us to move forward.
And then also like the fire turning, the fire apparatus that they can make, turn, you know how you do the.
The fire department did get our plans, so we'd be glad to meet with them or do whatever, but it's typically up to them to respond to, like some of the other boards did, but we'll be
Yeah,
glad
I
to meet
think
with
that
them.
sometimes they want to see a plan showing the turning radius and the,
Yeah, we'll get
We'll-
the
we'll take
dimensions
it
of the
Okay.
largest vehicle,
Yeah.
and then we'll
Yep.
impose that. Deb
Right.
does that all the time.
okay,
We'll get their big truck and we'll have it run
Perfect.
around the neighborhood and make sure. I think we did talk about that, Deb and I, on the bottom turn and the top turn. Yeah, it was definitely something that we considered.
yeah, I'm just worried, it's just a really like sharp right turn that I
Yeah.
don't, they have to go wide, and then I'm also concerned about the dead ends too, but.
I think we did have the basic dimensions of the large vehicle.
Yes.
We did.
We've
Didn't we?
done some of the analysis. It's
Yeah,
just we
so we
need to
did have
provide
it.
it
They were,
with the fire department.
yeah, they were very cooperative in sending us the information. at once.
Okay.
I just have a couple of general questions, then I want to open it up. I don't know if there's any town board members present. I don't see anyone I recognize out there, but they may be on the Zoom.
Yes. We have some other board members present on Zoom.
Okay, from other town boards.
Yes.
All right, so we'll get to them momentarily, then we will get to you, and then we definitely want to get into the pictures and what you folks have done when we're talking about traffic directly, okay? So sort of, I don't know, on a parallel track with us, but we mentioned, you mentioned the septic system and that being, factor, and obviously Title V approval for that for the design of that system. And that all goes to the Board of Health. That's beyond the purview of what we have jurisdiction over with the comprehensive permit. Do you have any timeline on that? Or are you planning to do that on a parallel
Well,
track?
typically,
No, we'll probably
Yeah.
wait till we
Yeah,
get to like a
right.
consensus plan design and a comprehensive permit with conditions sort of at that point. And then we'll go to that, like, we'll do that with Concom too. We give them the last bite at the apple, so.
Oh, so you're not gonna run the NOI concurrently?
No,
Would
no,
they
no,
have- I
no.
guess,
The
so
reason,
if we approve this and then when you go for your NOI, they have changes, so then you have to come back.
that's
to do a
correct.
mo-
That's
do a-
Yeah,
correct.
we'd
We
have
would,
to
we
come
would
back.
come back for
Yeah.
a change in the permit. You have to make a determination, substantial, insubstantial.
Yeah.
But typically, we don't go to the Conservation Commission for NOI because the development may change somewhat.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's why it's like you run the process concurrently, or the
no,
Concom.
no,
and then your-
no,
So
no.
that
We'll wait
any
till the
plan
end.
changes can be done concurrently.
Yeah.
Once,
I mean, whatever you want, I'm just thinking.
no, we're not
from
gonna,
like
we're
a-
not gonna go to this, it's not
If they
prudent.
have changes and we, then you have to come back to us, so
That's
it's
right.
saving you
And
that
that's-
one
that's
step
the-
of having to come back to us.
Well, except that we go to conversely, if we go to the Concom and they say it's all okay, and then, as we're going through the process, you say, well, you gotta change it, now we gotta go back over here. So it's best to wait until we're much further along.
Yeah, that's fine, I'm not gonna tell you how
Okay.
you're gonna run your application, but.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate the comment, but that's how we'll do it. And the Board of Health will be, I'm not sure if it's critical that we go at any particular time for Board of Health, but, we'll definitely start the process once we get further into this process with you folks and we have a comfort level that will make us feel like it makes sense.
So Board of Health and Concom then basically the timeline on that would, I'm just summarizing for myself.
Sure.
The timeline on that would be, once we reached a point where you had an approval with conditions, and the condition being that you get all the necessary
Yes,
approvals
exactly.
from
that's right.
Board of
By the
Health,
boards.
your
Yep.
septic.
Exactly.
Board of Health and, yep.
So it'll be after this process. And
That's
then-
what we anticipate.
Then you'll be back for modification.
Yeah.
It's like The Godfather. Every time we think. We try to maintain some sense of humor here, I can't help it.
I applaud that.
I look out at these faces, we can't take this too
If you
seriously.
folks are all set with the plan, we'll file the NOI tomorrow.
Exactly.
No, we haven't gotten there yet, okay.
Maybe next meeting.
Okay. And I know there's a lot of environmental concerns, and it looks like, building, I'm not an engineer, I don't claim to be one. But it looks like a lot of the construction is going to be in or near the wetlands. There's a lot of environmental concerns. Are those going to be addressed in the course of the project, or is that something you're waiting?
Both.
Well, yeah, I think
The
we consciously designed the project around, the 25-foot buffer zone to the bordering vegetated wetlands. While the state doesn't require us to do that, we did do that we did get mindful of that situation. But I think obviously we've kept the structures as far away from the wetlands as we can and still have the development make sense from this standpoint.
So when you say the 25, so there's the 100-foot wetlands buffer, and then there's a 50-foot no-build buffer, right?
Right.
So what is the
20,
25?
I thought it was 25.
We just,
Is it a
well-
25 no-build or a 50-foot no-build?
no, Walpole has a 25-foot no
I think
touch, I think
Medfield
it
is
is.
a
It's 50 in
50
Medfield.
no-build?
Yeah. So but the state doesn't, that's a local regulation that
Yeah.
we've asked a waiver for. So the state will allow us to go right up to the wetland, but we didn't do that. We're keeping it 25 feet, on any construction, 25 feet away from the wetlands.
One question that I actually had on, so these wetlands, I think were delineated, right? Because it has like wetland flag. In the application, it said that it was done by an RDA, but did you go through like a formal ANRAD process or an ORAD that you
We-
got?
We did, yes.
Okay, so you do have an ANRAD that
We do.
delineated the wetlands
Mhm.
and the vernal pool.
And the vernal pool.
Okay.
Well, the vernal pool was certified after the INRAD, I think, but yes, it's been certified.
Do you believe you need any approvals from the Walpole Conservation Commission, where it abuts Walpole wetlands?
I don't.
We
think
did
so.
have a letter from
we?
them.
There is a wetland that does bump out from theirs, but we're staying outside of the buffers, but we can double check that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I read the letter a while ago, and it is in the record. I think we sent you copies of all of them,
Yes,
at
we
least the
did.
board letters, so that you'd have easy access to them. But they did mention their 25-foot
Hmm.
no-bill zone,
that's where I
or
picked it up.
no-touch zone.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that, but I picked it up in their letter.
And to the extent that anything would encroach on that, then I think they'd be looking to
We were
meet with
staying
you
away from
folks
that.
as well.
We would stay away from that.
One question that I had on the wetlands, Marie, can you bring up the, I think it's in the
The wetland plan?
erosion. Yeah. So it shows a 50-foot buffer zone, it shows the 100-foot buffer zone, but there is a middle line that doesn't have I wasn't sure what that middle line is. So here you have the 50-foot buffer, the no-bill buffer, then the 100-foot outer. I didn't know what this middle green line was.
That was us looking at 100 feet around the vernal pool.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
It's just an evaluation line looking at the work that we have within that buffer area.
So, wait, so that middle green line is the 100-foot buffer from the vernal pool?
Yeah, so if you see VP and a number,
Yeah,
Just
vernal
outside.
pool.
that would be the demarcation of what was received through conservation, through the agent and our wetland scientist as limits of the vernal pool within the BVW.
Yeah, so the
So there's
vernal pool
two
doesn't
blue
have,
lines.
yeah, we're gonna, obviously this will come up at the NOI, but for the purposes of this board, comfort level, the vernal pool doesn't have a buffer zone. It has a habitat zone and it's within 100 feet. But that habitat zone does not exceed the limits of the bordering vegetated wetland when the vernal pool is entirely inside of a wetland. So we were just doing that for Bob's purposes, when he was trying to get the pool certified, and we had laid it out and said, this is the habitat area. But by virtue of the regulations on vernal pools, the habitat area does not extend past the bordering vegetated wetland line.
Okay. So then, because we have jurisdiction over the 50-foot, right, that's a local. On, Marie, can you just bring up the site plan for a second?
The other,
Yeah, oh, you can do this one. It looks like, oh no, with the structures on it. The site layout plan.
what sheet? You don't know what the brown house is?
C31.
Yeah, this is the one. It's just loading the.
Okay, so the ZBA has jurisdiction over the 50-foot wetland buffer.
It's a 100-foot buffer, and the 50-foot is the no bill, like the no disturb.
Yeah,
So
but
it-
that's what we have jurisdiction.
Yeah,
over.
100.
So it looks like the corner of this is a corner of this building within that buffer zone, so no bill, or no, it's this one. This corner, so you would need a request a waiver for that, the corner of that's within the 50-foot?
That is correct.
Yep.
It's approximately 30 feet.
Okay.
On average, I believe that dimension.
And this one's even closer. Yeah. Right? Oh no, never mind. That's a little setback.
So then, like in your waiver request, that's what I'm talking, that's what I would like to see, like, why you can't.
And sometimes what we do on the waiver, like, let's just say for the sake of discussion that we're asking for a waiver of the 50-foot line. We may set, what I typically like to do is not ask for a carte blanche on 50 feet, but there may be certain areas on the plan that we need. We might need it in this area, but not in that area.
Sure. yeah,
So
just-
sometimes,
just lay it out for us
so
we can
sometimes we
understand.
attach a plan to the,
That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah, okay.
You said we have town board members.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Would you?
Who do we have?
We have Conservation Commission Chair Deb Barrow and Conservation Commissioner John Woodhull present. There is no quorum of the Conservation Commission present. I think right now we only have Chair Deborah Barrow. Would you like to see if she
Does
would
she
like?
have any comments she'd like to make?
Would you like me to promote her to an attendee or panelist? Sorry.
Otherwise, we won't see or hear her.
Yes.
We can.
Alright, that's wrong device. Let me turn up the volume on the TV. Okay.
Are we still getting an echo?
Not anymore.
We're good.
Okay.
So I'm not gonna show my camera because I wasn't prepared to see you folks tonight, but,
Would you just identify yourself, please, for the record?
sure, I'm so sorry. So I'm Debbie Barrow, and I live at 10 Copperwood, and I'm right now the chair of the Medfield Conservation Commission. So I think that, because this will come before come at some point in time, that any comments that, I would have, I can't speak on behalf of the commission because everybody would have probably a slightly different opinion. I would, so I would defer until something came before us. I would point out though that when we on the commission talk about our 50-foot no disturb zone, we think of that as, and it is in our bylaw, so the local bylaw, as a no disturb zone as opposed to a no build zone. So I don't know that in other towns, if in a no build zone, that allows construction activities because you're not putting a building there. But in Medfield, the no disturb zone under the bylaw would be regarded as an area where you don't have any action, any alteration at all. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's different. I guess I'm just trying to draw the distinction between a no build and a no disturb. The other point is under bylaw, and there's a bylaw, a vernal pool is defined as the called tow park or the pond park, the park that has water up to a mean annual high water line plus 100 feet. So the vernal pool is not like the pool plus 100-foot buffer zone. The vernal pool is a resource area that is up to the mean annual high water line plus that's a pool vernal pool. And under the state act, your vernal pool would be mean annual high water line with a recognized zone of habitat that's beyond that mean annual high water line of another, 100 feet. There would be an area that would be highly investigated and looked at. So those are the only two comments that I would offer tonight, just to make those distinctions about our bylaw.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Deb, can I just have one clarification? When you say the no build, are you saying no structures or no alteration?
I don't know about other towns. I know that when we talk about our no disturb zone, we talk about no alteration in that area. But again, there is a presumption that the first 50 feet from a wetland, that area is an area that should not be altered. And there are, circumstances or conditions where that presumption that it needs to remain unaltered to protect the resource, that presumption could be overcome. But it would be no alteration in Medfield absent overcoming that presumption, with the burden on the applicant to demonstrate that there's no adverse consequence to the resource area. And in other towns, I don't know, but when I hear no disturb, no build, I'm assuming they may allow some alteration, but not a structure. I don't know. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the distinction.
You're welcome.
I'm learning.
Me too.
Okay. Anything else?
Not for me, and thank you
All right.
for doing all the things you're doing.
All right. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank
Any other town?
Let me just go through not that I recognize, but if there is a member of a town board or committee, if you want to raise your hand or type in the Q&A, but these are not names I recognize.
You don't know everyone on every board?
I know, it's shocking. The amount of meetings I have.
I know. Can't keep track of our own boards.
There's a time a long time ago when I knew most people in town. Now it's gone the other way. I think there's a date and there's an exact day where you get the maximum point of how long you've been in town and how many people you know. It starts going the other way. Okay. All right. Well, at this point, so that we still have some time to get into traffic while we're still awake, does anyone from the audience, the attendees, have general comments or questions at this point? Take them one at a time, and as Maria said, if you just come over here so that you're picked up on the mic for TV, and start by.
And Mr. Chair, would you like to hear from Tetra Tech tonight on their report, or would you like to hold?
Yeah, well, we're gonna get,
I've done a lot of items already.
right,
Summarize ones that haven't.
no, I know, I just want to give these folks a chance to, general comments.
Hi, my name's Robert Desilets. I live at 94 Plain Street. So 3 houses down from where the new development will be built, up a really, really steep hill, coming south down 27. So coming down that really dangerous hill that we're talking about with the bend in the road before we get to the new development. And so I was able to read the report that recommendations on the traffic study, and was able to go down the street this past weekend with my kids and take some pictures that I sent to Maria. I don't know if you would like to pull those up. I think it would be very helpful for everyone to kind of see the existing conditions of the road and where the development would be built. And so one of the big things that hasn't been mentioned in here is that in the Medfield guidelines, it says the distance between, according to our town, minimum distance between entering streets not directly opposite each other is 225 feet. The distance between Briar Hill and the new development I measured would be 65 feet. So well under the minimum distance that we have for the town, which would create a very, very dangerous intersection on Plain Street. Part of that, the other part, so based on that distance, I would assume that minimum distance is that if you're coming down that street and you're looking and Briar Hill is on your left-hand side and something is happening on that street, a kid is playing, a car is coming out, the attention of the driver is going to be taken to that street. You're going to come over that hill, which is 100 feet away from where this new road's going to be, and you're not going to see if someone was coming out of that road, it's going to be a major collision and someone's going to die. And so the other part to that is if you're looking, traveling down Plain Street, so the first picture I put in the bigger kind of brochure has a yellow house on the left-hand side, and that's Briar Hill. Measured with a tape measure, it's 100 feet, so this is the picture we're looking at.
Right. I think they all are not in order, so.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
I merged them all, so. I know you sent the second set, right?
Yeah.
So is that 100 feet from the existing?
From the existing driveway right now, where there's a telephone pole there,
Okay.
is 100 feet to that point. It's
Okay,
past
got it.
Briar Street. So it's past the driveway, but you can see Briar Street on the left-hand side. That's 100 feet from there, and you're past Briar Street. And from that point, you're going up a hill, which is shown in another picture. This picture here, this would be where the driveway, this would be the road where it is. That's a telephone pole, and that's Briar Hill. And you can see that massive hill with the bend on there. That's 100 feet away from where the driveway would be. The sight line from there, that's the only place that you're able to see that street. Once you go over that hill and you go further up, you cannot see
Do you
the
have
street.
additional copies that you could
Yes.
give them? These folks here.
Yeah.
So that we're all looking at the same thing. Thanks.
Yes, it bends in the hill.
200 feet, if you can see the mailbox with 88 on it, it's past the middle of that driveway. That's 200 feet. According to the traffic study, it said that's 220 feet vision that you were able to see where the new road is going to be. I do not see how that's possible when that's 200 feet, and you can see in that picture, there's no way you can see where that road is going to be. Thank you.
Okay.
So when you start going down the street and you see this and it's creating this really dangerous intersection, like I said, I live at 94, so I live 3 houses away from there, and the elevation through my backyard is to where this new development's going to be. And it's down a massive, massive gully. And from Walpole all the way down that hill is a huge hill starting in Walpole, coming all the way down there. Every morning I'm out there with my kids, and cars are going 40 miles an hour at least, and I'm trying to get them to slow down. There's huge trucks coming down that. If they come down over that hill and cars are coming out to the extent of 200 cars coming out of that driveway, there's going to be an accident. There's no way those big trucks that come from Walpole, tree trucks, dump trucks, coming down that road are going to be able to stop, especially in wintry conditions with 100 feet of stopping ability to be able to come out of this road. So to say that there's not going to be accidents, this is just accidents waiting to happen. We have laws in Medfield about the distances between roads. It's not even close to being required, and there's nothing that you can do to make that distance 225 feet. It's going to be 65, 100 feet, maybe maximum between those two streets. And then you're coming where there's no visibility whatsoever, coming down a steep hill, coming through a bend where you can't see anything. So massive, massive work would have to be done to that intersection to make it compliable where someone would not be getting hurt. Someone walking down that street, it's just it would be a really two streets right across from each other, almost right across from each other, but not. They could never be across from each other down a road where people can't see. Create a very, very dangerous situation. The next point that I just want to make is out of the requirements, it talked about making the road at least 18 feet down the whole entire Plain Street. I measured down Plain Street. There's multiple pictures on there. It's 16 feet at multiple areas from where the new development's going to be all the way to Medfield Gardens. There's multiple areas where there's tree and telephone poles, and there's wetlands on both sides of the road. So that in order to expand the road, in order to expand the road, you would have to be taking down trees, moving telephone poles, and disturbing more wetlands than the development's already building. You can see that there's flowing water. There's a picture of flowing water where there's a pipe underneath the ground that has running water underneath on both sides of the road that is 16 feet wide at that point. So you'd be doing major work to that road in order to get it to be 18 feet, which is the minimum. Never mind, it suggests putting in bike lanes and walkways down that road with all the people that are going to be living in there, which would further go into the wetlands down that road. Down at the end of the intersection near 27, where there's other pictures on there, it's 16 feet there where the new houses were built. Down another bend in the road with a hill on it. It's only 16 feet wide. It's very dangerous every single time we turn onto that road, knowing if another car is coming the other way and they're more in the middle of the road because everyone on that small road drives in the middle of the road. Adding more cars to that part of the intersection would be extremely dangerous. In order to expand that part, you would be cutting down huge, huge trees that are there that the houses that were just built there are using for shade for their lawns. You'd be tearing down these huge, nice trees that are right there to expand the road, and you would probably have to level it off because, again, on that road, it's very, very dangerous. There's pictures of that.
Plus it's a country way.
And it's a country way, and it's a scenic way. So they're asking, in order for this development to happen, you would have to do major, major work to the whole entire Plain Street Road. The Medfield Gardens are in the middle of Plain Street. We have pictures that my wife took and sent in, making it a one-way road 9 months out of the year.
I think we've all driven out by it.
So to add 200 more trips down that road, 9 months of the year, it's a one-way road. Everyone's having to stop. It's creating a very, very dangerous situation there. At the Medfield Gardens, in that distance, it's 16 feet there. Again, huge trees, one side wetlands, one side huge trees that the gardens need. You would have to probably make a parking lot, which I don't even think is, that land isn't used for that. I don't think it's, I think it's for the gardens. I don't think it's part of building a parking lot into that area. So there's just so many obstacles just to make the street able to handle all this traffic and to make it safe. You can see in the pictures, my kids are on the side of the road. It's a really narrow road. We try and go down the garden as much as possible. Cars have to stop when my kids are riding the bike to get around us because they're worried about hitting the kids.
Okay.
So it's an extremely dangerous situation.
Thank you. Does anyone have a different point?
I live at 1 Plain Street, so I just wanted to quickly.
Sure. Go right ahead. Oh, and again, I'm not trying to stifle discussion, but if a point's been well made, and that's what the point you wanted to make, go with him. He did well.
Eric Gallione, I live at 1 Plain Street, one of the new houses that was built in 2021. So I live at the mouth of between 27 North and Plain Street, so right where that intersection is. I have to talk about the traffic analysis. I don't know if it was made during COVID on a Sunday. Guys, I have, to be serious, and Maria knows this, I have personally been there pulling teenagers out of cars myself, in the last 3 years, multiple kids out of cars from accidents that maybe technically did not happen at the intersection. Maybe they were 20 feet down because the curve, but they are at the intersection. So I don't know if we're playing games with the technicality of the intersection, but they are at the intersection because they are right in front of my house. So
is that where one is like someone on Plain Street is turning left and then?
Yeah, if you were on Plain Street and you were
with
making a
someone?
left turn at that, where that little garden thing is,
Yeah.
yes. So that's my house is right in front of that. There have been multiple accidents there already. multiple accidents. It's been very dangerous. The police that have come to the scene have told us since we moved there that this has happened for years at this location, that it is not new. It is well known that old wall across the street has taken multiple hits over the years. It's well known that that house has taken multiple hits. The owners that had just moved from there, one of the reasons they moved was because they were tired of it. So it's very scary. I have two very young children, 18 months and 2 years old. I hope their car is never one of those cars. I swear to God. So to say that there's no accidents, and I'm glad I was at the back of the room. Let's put it that way. But that's one point. The accidents are happening now when there's nothing on that road. People are flying down that road every day now. It's very dark too. We haven't even talked about that. It's pitch black. Pitch black. I cannot imagine traffic going down that road at night because it's very quiet at night right now. There's plenty of deer. There's plenty of deer. So it's pitch black. So I can't imagine at night what that would be like as a hub, if you will. I haven't heard one word about lights at all. But if we put traffic there, and I will send you some pictures today. I took some on my way here. There was one truck, landscaping truck, right in front of my house today. Did you guys see? There was maybe 6 or 7 cars backed up.
Just try to,
Sorry, I'm a very interactive person. Sorry, I appreciate it.
no, if you could just direct the
apologize.
comments to us.
I like an audience. I apologize. There was 6 or.
We'll clap loud.
I used to be a singer, so I'm facing like this way. There was about 6 or 7 cars just because one truck was there at that lip. That lip is very or entrance to Plain Street is very tight. So to back that up with multiple cars, multiple traffic coming both ways, that is the mouth of the town going towards Walpole and going the other way as we mentioned earlier. I just can't imagine, just when you said you have good eyes, I can't imagine how that would not affect the traffic going both ways into town if you just automatically stuck a giant busy road into the middle of where the towns intersect. There's a school there as well, Elm. There's just a lot of added things that are being talked about that are busy today. So just my 2 cents there. I'll leave you with that, but just some of those thoughts. Yep.
Before we continue, I think since we kind of morphed into traffic, let's hear from Tetra Tech, please, because they have some response and I think have addressed or begun to address some of these concerns.
Thank you. For the record.
We can.
Sorry. For the record, Courtney Sudak from Tetra Tech, the town's traffic consultant. So as the applicant indicated, we submitted a letter on Friday that outlined our review of the traffic study and the site plans as they relate to transportation related elements. The traffic study was primarily done in accordance with industry standards and Mass DOT standards and the town standards, but we did identify several items that we wanted them, or we recommended to the board that they have the applicant look into more detail of. So I will briefly state those items. One, for the crash analysis, it was generally done in accordance with industry standards. Currently, the Mass DOT crash database is only verified, meaning they are no longer looking at it. They've confirmed that what is in the database is what consultants should use to analyze traffic through a couple of years ago. So we recommended that they look into the data that is available, even though it's not technically verified, just to determine if there were additional accidents, to determine in the last couple of years to see if there were any identifiable crash trends and safety issues. We also noted that they did include a site distance evaluation in the narrative of the report, and they also provided a intersection site distance horizontal profile on the plan as part of the study. So we recommended that they expand upon that to include the vertical profiles as well. And we also recommended that they include the stopping site distance plans and profiles, and to do that for both driveways. So for the exiting vehicles, the concern when you're looking at site distance is for vehicles turning left or right out of the driveway. For an entrance only, you want to make sure that if a vehicle is slowing down to turn right or left into the driveway, that there's adequate stopping site distance for vehicles approaching from behind that vehicle to see it. So say around a bend, and be able to slow down and come to a stop if there's a vehicle or an object in the road. So we recommended that. We also recommended, as Ms. Barton suggested, that the site distance evaluation be based on what we refer to as the 85th percentile travel speed. That means that 85% of the vehicles are going up to that speed. That's the typical industry standard when you're talking about looking at a design speed. We did also recommend that because the 85th percentile speed is above the regulatory speed limit of 30 miles per hour, that they work with the town to identify potential traffic calming measures that can be implemented along the roadway as part of the project. We did ask them to take a closer look at the feasibility of a alternative site driveway layout and alignment, most notably to limit it to one single access point, but also to look at maximizing the spacing between Briar Hill Road across the street and where vehicles are coming into and out of this project. We also had recommended, as was mentioned earlier tonight, that they look at the turning analysis of the largest emergency vehicle anticipated to be at the site. Typically, that's a ladder truck. And then that the fire department should weigh in, particularly with the hammerhead designs at some of the locations within the site. But we also asked them to conduct the auto turn analyses of trash and delivery vehicles based on the anticipated operations of where trash receptacles will be. And given the narrowness of the road being 20 feet, if there's, a delivery truck, whether it's a box truck from Amazon or a larger moving vehicle, that they're not impeding access along the roadway. And lastly, we also asked them to inventory the pavement width, which is different than the right-of-way width. So the pavement width that's currently out there today on Plain Street, and note any areas that are less than 18 feet wide. The 18 feet width minimum comes from the industry standard from the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. You may have heard it referred to as AASHTO. That's the guideline, roadway design guideline that most agencies use. And for low volume roadways, which is less than 2,000 vehicles per day, which is what this which Plain Street experiences, the minimum is 18 feet as long as land use isn't an industrial use. So that's where that minimum comes from. So those are the main points that we asked for them to provide more clarification analysis of.
Couple of questions. In terms of the crash analysis, if I understand you saying that basically the data that's been used was the latest that was there or confirmed, but it's 2 or 3 years old.
Yes, it's what we refer to as the latest available data. The town is, at your discretion, able to request that the applicant request actual police reports from the police department.
That's exactly what I was going to
yes.
ask is, to this gentleman's point, of the accidents at the corner of 27. And I can remember the white stone wall across the street being out of commission more than once in the 45 years I've been in town. So would it make sense in your view to require police data for crashes on 27 in the immediate vicinity of that corner?
Yes, to get a better understanding, you can do that. The crash rates that they were referring to earlier, which is an equation that consultants used to determine the crash frequency was below the statewide and district-wide averages. When that happens, collision diagrams and a more detailed assessment of police records isn't normally conducted, which is why they did not do that. But absolutely, if there's a concern from the town, you can ask them to put in the request to the police department, and then it's at the police department's discretion if they want to release that for more detailed analysis.
Okay. And you mentioned the location of the driveway, and that also came up with Mr. Desolette with the all of the pictures and with the tape measure, which is extremely helpful to. I'm a visual learner, so.
Yeah, as am I.
But just looking at the plan, if, for instance, the driveway, even if it were to run sort of along the road, were relocated to try to be further, I guess, north on the site, or to only have the single, to create as much distance, short of going in and taking out the hill.
Yes.
Because I did, I drove down through Walpole and then kind of looked back, and came back that way, and it's a tough sideline to be able to pull out. So it's something that potentially could be done.
Yes, so when we recommended that they expand their site distance analysis with additional plans and profiles, that's what they'll be demonstrating or showing what would need to be removed in order to maximize site distance. As far as the intersection spacing, that's more related to minimizing the amount of overlap in what we call the decision zones or the influence zones of intersections.
Do you know what the distance is from that egress point? Because it looks like they moved it as far, like up to their lot line, which is as far north, pretty much up to their lot line. So they can't move that exit drive or that egress drive any further up. What is that sightline distance as cars are going that north towards 27? What is that distance? And then
So
what should it be, I guess, for safety?
yes, so that's an excellent question. Again, the resource that's usually used for that analysis is from AASHTO. And there's a very specific methodology and protocol for measuring the available distance and as well as calculating the minimum required distances. And that's very specific and unique to each point that you're analyzing or evaluating site distance. So once they identify if there's a more appropriate, from a traffic perspective at least, a more appropriate driveway design, then they'll run, we've asked that they run the site distance analysis again, and we'll know then at that specific point what's required and what they think is available. And the reason we're asking them to plot out the plans for those is because what we call the site distance triangles would need to be clear of obstructions, which would include, as some of the members of the public stated earlier, may include trees that need to be large diameter trees, and other items that would have to be reviewed and approved by the town, particularly being a scenic road, which has its own special requirements.
Right. Okay, so they're gonna do that analysis, come back with that analysis basically on the site triangle and then the sightline distance.
Yes, they've
Okay.
done they have done an evaluation. We're just asking them to do more and to also use the 85th percentile speed. But since we're also asking them to look at an alternative driveway design to maximize spacing to the extent feasible, like you said, they are limited along the property frontage to certain locations. We'll take a look at their updated site distance evaluation and can weigh in at that time.
And I guess with that, they'll probably have to be removing trees or shrubs, and because it is a scenic road, that's like a planning board approval. So does that go to the planning board, or who has jurisdiction of that?
The scenic road, I think, is county or state, isn't it?
I defer to Mr. Haverty.
Scenic road is still something that is a locally approved thing, and the Board of Appeals has jurisdiction over that as part of its process.
So then we would need to know what trees or, what's gonna be removed essentially from the scenic road.
And I think some of that come from the reports that
Okay,
the rest requested.
okay.
So this board can authorize or not the
Correct.
removal of trees and walls,
Yes.
whatever is necessary.
And then
Well, way
whatever
to go that way.
conditions after the fact, right, is like clearing, because if you're gonna be maintaining that sightline distance, I'm sure you'd have to prune, you know, periodically or annually or whatever, prune the shrubs and stuff like that, so is that like, can we condition that, or is that, they have to go back every time they wanna?
No, you can include a condition that requires those site triangles to be maintained so
Okay.
that the proper site distance is available.
Okay.
Now, and again, this is presuming that this is on their property. If it's on town property, it's a different question.
I think it's on their,
Yeah, I
I
guess
mean, I
that's the
think it's on
question,
their.
because we were talking before about, you know, an average 18-foot layout, the term was used. And the pictures all show 16 feet of pavement, and layout is generally wider than the pavement on any road. Okay, so if it's an 18-foot layout, the tree that's right next to the 16 feet of pavement could well be within the town layout of the road. Do we then have jurisdiction over that?
You would, because that'd be something then that the DPW could approve as part of its normal process. If the property is, if the, say the layout is limited to the actual existing width of the roadway, and the property, you know, it's their property that's abutting it, and therefore, you know, any of these trees are on their property, they can absolutely do that as part of this process. If it's on someone else's property and not within the existing town layout, then it becomes a problem.
So that if the-
One
if
which you
the
wouldn't have any
egress is-
jurisdiction over.
The egress is right up against the FAF property. If there's a tree that's obstructing the sight
I
line,
think we need to figure out,
and
you
it's
know,
on someone else's property,
we need to figure out how wide the town layout is
right,
to make that determination.
okay.
If you look at some of the pictures, yeah,
Go ahead.
I'm saying, if you look at some of the pictures they gave us, there's certainly trees on other properties that we're gonna have to look at. You know, if you look at the one in the middle you're looking at,
Can we hold it down, please, folks?
I'm just saying, if you look at the map, you know, Briar Hill is obviously before the first, you know, intersection for the new development, and there's trees before Briar Hill that I would think are gonna block your vantage point. Looking at the pictures, obviously a site visit's gonna help us, so. I think it's something that we may have to think about.
We have a question. Yes, in the green, front row.
Me?
Yes. you.
Okay, please tell.
Will you step over here so that
Different
picked
people
up on
wearing
the
green in
tape.
the front row.
Hi, I'm Susan Weiner, and I live at 88 Plain Street. And yes, we have trees on our property, and there's also those stones, and I have a major blind spot right there, and that's where the elevation is.
Right.
And that's all I wanted to say, because you were wondering if there could be trees there that aren't on the town's property, but I believe they're also part of our trees too. And then there's a huge elevation there. So I don't know how you get around that.
unless part of the
And
project.
he's the other one that lives at 88. I don't know if he wants to add to that.
One Bradford Road.
Thank you.
My house runs along the Plain Street and a lot.
Sorry, could you come in front of the microphone, please? Thank you.
Pramod, I live in 1 Briar Hill Street. So that's right opposite the
And your name?
Pramod.
Okay.
So it's right in front of it's right opposite the entrance to the 86 Plain Street. The yellow house somebody mentioned. That's my house.
We got a picture of it right here.
Exactly. So, so I have trees that run along the Plain Street. In my property, that probably is definitely less than 18 feet. I think 16 feet is what the prior gentleman said, right? And I think I want to also mention that, I walk my dog every day. I think a lot of you have seen me. And it's extremely dangerous to have my dog walking when both the sides of the cars are coming together. Like, it's really, really dangerous. And, I've, especially in the blind spot, because they can't see me from Briar Hill Road, from my property. If we just step out onto Plain Street, folks coming from the other side cannot see who's walking on the side of the street. And especially if there's traffic on both sides, it's really dangerous. And moreover, during summer, especially when Medfield Garden is in full play, there are a lot of cars parked on the Plain Street, and only one way a car can go, back and forth.
Thank you.
That's all I want to say. Thanks.
I guess
So-
I would also think that during the winter time when there's snow plowing and stuff in the banks, like, that probably gets high too, when you're plowing the streets. So it makes the road even more narrow.
Something that strikes me, and I don't know whether this, if we were to grant the comprehensive permit, whether it's something that could or even should be a condition or part of the permit, but might be part of the discussion, because ultimately these comprehensive permits should, in an ideal world, become a discussion between the applicant and the neighbors and the town and everyone who's impacted and benefited, hopefully, by the project, so that some good comes out of it for everyone. It sounds like there's been existing, when I look at that street, I live on Orchard Street, which is the other side of town, but it's also a scenic way, and it runs from Norfolk through Medfield, across the Charles River into Millis. People go 40 miles an hour on there. I understand personally completely what you guys are talking about. And I wonder if there is a way to talk about, at this point, incorporating into this project, maybe getting the town and maybe the developer is part of the project to help with improving the sightlines on the street for everyone's benefit.
Like traffic calming measures.
I just throw that out there. Yes, yeah.
Mr. Chair, did you want me to respond to
Yeah,
that?
please.
That is something that, the board certainly can have as a discussion as part of its process. And it would really depend upon the applicant's willingness, to be part of that discussion.
Okay. No, because I know we've done it in other projects. All of you are familiar with the
Dale Street.
the corner of Dale Street. I draw a blank on the names of the projects once we're done with them. But the one on the corner of Dale Street, part of that was, traffic light improvements, and there were a lot of things that they did and some concessions. They actually funded the safety study that's going to give us our own roundabout at West Street as part of that. So, I think that's something to maybe think about having a conversation as we go along.
Thank you. I'm Mike Weiner. I live at 88 Plain Street. And like you guys, I heard you say you've been doing a law for 30-something years, and you've been doing this, well, I've been living there for 40 years. And I appreciate your magnanimous approach to the middle class and how you want to favor them. And I wish you would have the same approach to our safety and welfare. Okay. Now, I have a question. I don't know who you want me to address it to about the sites,
it to us.
the site distance that the first study did at the firm that they hired.
Yep.
I want to know whether they did that on a level road, whether they considered wet conditions, and whether they considered trucks coming down that road.
Okay. Want to respond to that, or?
Respond to that quickly. So the initial site review and site distance analysis, which was included in the traffic study and prepared by Merrill Engineers, included a flat profile, which is something that Tetra Tech had requested that we update. And so the plan is to update that pending sort of the discussion around the driveway itself. In terms of trucks and the type of vehicle, it's typically a passenger car that's done this, unless it's a road that's destined or primarily for trucks. So passenger car was the sort of the design vehicle in this case. In terms of dry versus wet, there is, as part of the stopping site distance formulas, a number of perception reaction time and the actual braking distance time, which reflects, a worst case scenario, which would be a wet road. So obviously, we all know it takes longer to stop in icier and wet conditions, but this is sort of the industry standard for stopping site distance is what was used.
So in my interpretation is the answer is no.
No.
You didn't consider any of that.
Hey, sir, please. Direct
Okay.
the
So
comment.
I only have one more question. I have a lot of environmental
No, but
questions,
please.
but we're going to stick with traffic tonight. And I have to ask the attorney this question. Who has jurisdiction over whether or not this gets approved? Is it the state that has jurisdiction to approve this road?
When you mean, does the state have jurisdiction to approve the road?
Yeah.
What do you
Well,
ask?
if they want to build a road there, who has to approve it?
If they want to build a road interior to their
No, the road that
development?
they're proposing, widening a 12-foot road to a 20-foot road, okay, with the
Talking about the
intersecting.
driveway.
Yeah, with the intersecting lines, who has to give them permission?
That's part of this process.
So,
Board
so
of
if the
Appeals. You're
Board of,
talking about their access road on their property.
yeah, so if the Board of Appeals says no, and they go to the Housing Appeals Committee, okay, the Housing Appeals can overrule
Correct.
what the ZBA does, but do they have to still comply with the state regulations?
I'm not sure what state regulations will be
Well,
applicable.
whatever DOT, whatever, there's got to be rules about where roads can be placed, sight lines,
So first of all,
intersecting lines.
this is going to be an access way to a condominium association. So I'm not sure it would even technically be determined to be a road. It's probably more considered to be a driveway. I'm not sure that there's any state requirements that would be applicable other than the generally accepted engineering provisions such as the ASHTO requirements.
So if they were not in compliance with the ASHTO requirements, could the road be denied, and by who?
So it's not really that the road would be denied if they're not in. So let's take a look at the site distance issue that we're discussing, which we have not come to a determination yet as to whether or not the ASHTO requirements are met. There is a Housing Appeals Committee decision specifically addressing this issue, which found that there was a situation in Groton where the Board of Appeals was asked to grant basically to grant a waiver to allow for trimming on municipally owned property. It was owned by the Groton Electric Light Department. And the Housing Appeals Committee essentially said, sure, we'll grant you the waiver to require that trimming because it's necessary to achieve the required site distance for the project. That was taken up to, I think it was the SJC, and basically they ruled that that's a property interest, not subject to waiver under Chapter 40B.
I read that case,
Okay,
and they
so-
denied them to do it.
So in that instance, because they didn't have the appropriate site distance, couldn't acquire it through this easement, the project was ultimately
Okay,
denied.
so in that vein, if they have to remove tree, and first of all, I would never let them agree to take any of my property and do anything with it. But if they go, if some of that land is the town's, because it's that distance from the side of the road, would the same condition prevail for the town, that they couldn't force the town to take a tree down or grade it differently?
Well, no, because in that instance, it's going
Because
to
it's
be.
not an easement?
It's with a public right of way. And that right of way, the town has not only really the authority, but the requirement to make sure that their public ways are safe. So if the question is that this roadway is not safe because it's not wide enough, and there is sufficient room to widen it, it's going to be the town's obligation to do so.
So if it makes it uneconomic for them, you can't do it, but if it makes it uneconomic for the town, I guess it's okay.
So there is a long line of Housing Appeals Committee decisions addressing the inability of a municipality to make improvements to municipal infrastructure. And the burden on the town is to show that it's going to be so economically burdensome that it's just not feasible to do.
Okay.
And I don't have any basis of saying whether that would be the case or not here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, folks. Bill Hasapitas. I live at 27 Plain Street. Been there 33 years. It was one of the 2 original homesteads on Plain Street. I was going to make a comment about my close friend and neighbor, Bill Holmquist, who in '98, to prevent development of Plain Street and to preserve the beauty and the wildlife and everything, basically gave 100 acres of land to the town that's now used as community gardens. So he had a real appreciation, as most of us who have lived on Plain Street for a long time have. Trying to go quick here. In terms of the road, I can tell you at the end of my driveway, it's 16 feet wide. Bordered on a lot of the sides, both sides of Plain Street, by historic stone walls. So the scenic way, a lot of trees involved, but there's also a lot of historic stone walls that were originally built because the original Plain Street ran behind on the cart path. So there's also very little shoulder on a lot of Plain Street because it's wet. So where you have 16 feet, 18 feet of asphalt in a few areas, not many, it drops down into a gully on both sides. So it's very dangerous. There are no storm drains, as you know. Anytime it rains or we get a wet winter, that floods on the sides. A lot of times it floods, then freezes. You don't have the luxury, even the option of pulling to the shoulder when one of the Royer tree trucks or a short collision, or when they were doing the subdivision of the West Street bridges, all of the construction trucks coming down. I learned you basically stop and let them pass and go. If there's another car before that, it gets ugly. It still does. I've ridden my bike, I walked my dog. When my kids were little, we'd walk. You basically pull off the road when any cars come. That's with the existing traffic flow. It's a heavy traffic flow. I can tell you before the '98 construction with the West Street Bridge in Walpole, you could count the number of cars on Plain Street. It was great. You could sit out there quiet. That ended when everyone realized it was a cut through from Medfield to Walpole and Norfolk. There is a lot of traffic on that street. People fly. It's not 35, Christine. It's 45 and 50. And in fairness to people, they don't realize how fast they're going. The town at one point put a cop up there to see if it warranted putting speed bumps, putting a sign. It's dangerous. The sight lines at Briar Hill, when I ride my bike and I'm returning, and I can tell you because I have a computer on my bike, I can hit 35 miles an hour on my bike coming downhill. And if a car is coming, and I know the area, so I'm careful, but if a car is coming out of a driveway or a double driveway, ingress, egress, it could be ugly. And it's the kids fly down there. The kids used to go down to the community garden fields and light their fires and drink and stuff at night and then come out. So there's a lot of activity there. It's just, it's not, and I don't say this because I live on Plain Street. I say this because I love the town and I love the history, and I've done a lot in my 33 years to preserve my little spot that I'm custodian of. It's a place where you need to respect the environment. You need to respect, they talk about buffers. 50 feet is nothing. There's turkeys, there's coyotes, there's deer, there are all sorts of things that get displaced. I saw it with Kettle Pond Way, which I love, nice neighborhood behind me, Coal Drive. By the way, the buses do not go down there. They didn't apply for a special waiver to go in and pick up kids. Kids walk to the end on the sidewalks. We have sidewalks on Plain Street. When it snows, they don't get plowed on Kettle Pond Way. They don't get plowed, so kids walk in the middle. It's dangerous. So you're not going to have a bus pulling down, in all likelihood, going all the way down to the end of a dead end road and then backing out. So in terms of traffic, it's someone who's been there a long time, I can tell you it's a dangerous area that cannot really accommodate the existing flow of traffic well. You learn to navigate it, and you exercise caution, and it works out. But 24 houses squeezed into 6 acres with however many cars coming out, with 300 visits a day or something, it's a lot, and people would. I just think it would be a disaster waiting to happen. So,
thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hello, my name is Maria Dorney. I live on 165 Granite Street. So I walk my dogs from my house, 165, all the way to Plain Street. It takes me a good maybe 25 minutes walking my 2 dogs. I have to go through Walpole. It is true that this project is going to be in Medfield, but you also have to think about it. There is a cut through from Walpole. As my neighbor said, people go through West Street and drive through Granite on Walpole, which is very narrow. So then it becomes Plain Street. So we are all discussing here Medfield, that's true. And I'm not talking on behalf of Walpole, but Walpole is right there. So Walpole doesn't change the situation. It's still a narrow street. You cannot even walk. I cannot walk my dog without having to go to the side. If a truck or landscaping company is there, it's always dangerous, especially when there are two cars. It is a cut-through. If you go through Kittredge Street, and then you have here Granite, and then you have the other street, so there are three intersections, basically, 3 cars that they can come. So you always have to look who is going to turn where. So with the traffic that is going to increase, this project is just going to get worse. People, instead of going through Plain Street, they're going to be cutting through Kittredge Street all the way to Granite Street, right? So because everybody's going to try to get out on 27. So that's a reality. This project is just going to cause more chaos, not just for my neighbor from Plain Street, but also for people that live in Kittredge, that is part of Walpole, and that also live on Granite Street, because that's the way people are going to try to get out. They're going to try to get out, I think it's Granite Street all the way to 27, or Rocky Lane, which is a very popular. That's what it happens. Every single day I drive, people are going to be trying to cut through to go to the train station right behind. They're not going to go like Plain Street and 27. They're going to go right behind Walpole, West Street, and then they're going to cut through. So that's what is going to happen. So, I mean, I understand the need for housing, but I also understand our safety. I live there. My neighbors live there. We enjoy the peaceful scenery, even with all the madness when traffic happens. So I just want you to consider that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. I didn't see any other hands. So
All right. So let's see. So I'm Rosalind Deslitz. I live at 94 Plain Street. Before addressing Mr. Chairman McNicholas and the board, I just want to take a moment to thank all of my neighbors who are here tonight, who rearranged your evenings and got out of work early and arranged for a babysitter to be here. So thank you, because I know we all care for our town. So I've been a resident of Medfield, living on Plain Street with my family since 2017. And we moved to Medfield from Dedham, which is a good town, but it didn't crack the top 10 places to live in the recent Boston Magazine rating. But when we were looking at homes in Medfield, we asked our realtor, why was Medfield such a better town than Dedham, and what makes the difference, right? Like, why? Why are some towns considered better than others? And she told us that Medfield is a town where people get involved, where people care and they speak up and they volunteer their time and their talents to protect, what makes Medfield great. And so I think that's why we're all here tonight. And so I'm not going to speak to the myriad of safety and environmental and traffic concerns that we've spoken to. I just want to share a little bit of background. Chairman McNicholas, you mentioned that you're coming in, you and the board are coming in fairly new to this. I'm not new. I'm a full-time working mom. I have 2 young children, and I've given up hours and hours of much-needed sleep and time with my children in order to educate myself and learn about the various iterations of developments that have been proposed for this property at 86 Plain Street. And I've spent this time because I love our street, our neighborhood, our town. And just to give some background, originally the developer had proposed 6 to 8 or 9 homes on the property at 86 Plain Street. A year ago, the end of March, a few neighbors and I wrote some letters of opposition. And then over the summer, at that point, because there was some opposition shown, I believe, the developer then decided to go the 40B route. There was no outreach to abutters to address our concerns or have a discussion around how we could make the road a bit safer or, find some happy medium. Instead, the 40B route was pursued, which, has its own unique regulations, and that's why you're here tonight, too, to help us with that. So while I appreciate the concern that was expressed by Mr. Gard for preserving the American dream and ensuring that there's no shortage of affordable housing, I'm just not seeing that expressed throughout the process. I also want to note to the board that in the application to Mass Housing that was submitted in the fall, there were numerous untruths that were mentioned in the application. Among them that the application listed that all amenities were accessible by public transportation. There is no public transportation in our town. The closest public the Walpole MBTA is a good 45-minute walk from 86 Plain Street. The applicant also noted NA for the existence of vernal pools. There is indeed a certified vernal pool, certified by the state. You have the email from the state in your packet of materials. And the applicant also listed none for prior development efforts at the site. But in fact, a prior developer proposed a subdivision with 4 homes that the Medfield Planning Board had denied on May 21st, 1996, for the same concerns that we are here for tonight, for safety and environmental. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of that background because, you know, I've spent a lot of time on this and because I care for our town and for preserving it.
Yeah, when was the prior plan submitted that the neighbors objected to?
There was a proposal last, like March, like, I don't know, we wrote the letters the end of March. I don't know when it was submitted.
Yeah, it wasn't a formal submission. It was a non-binding preliminary discussion to try to take a temperature check of the abutters and the Planning Board and Conservation Commission. Nothing was officially filed, and it wasn't a public hearing process, but it allowed the developers to gather some feedback on the area and how the boards initially felt about the proposal. And we did receive some letters from the abutters, which we shared with the developers at the time.
So it never reached the level of a formal application?
No.
For anything?
No.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Yes.
I'm Judy Schmidt. I live on 4 Briar Hill Road. And most of what I wanted to say has already been said by everybody else tonight. So I might be redundant in some ways. I just want to point out some other things that's happening on Briar Hill, because already Plain Street is narrow. We often have landscaping trucks that park on our street because there's no room for them to park on Plain Street. So that's already, we often during the summer, we have lots of people just parking there. And they drive their tractors down the street, it's a cul-de-sac, and then they go to whatever house they're servicing. Also, we've become a turnaround for the Medfield Gardens because you can't turn around in Plain Street, it's too narrow. So that's already an issue without additional traffic. Okay, I don't know who's aware, but Plain Street is also a place where teenagers play chicken. So there's a lot of, you can hear it at night, in the middle of the night, kids daring each other, racing down the streets. If we have more traffic, it's going to be a bigger thing. So far, there's been no tragic accidents. I just keep waiting. You can hear it in the summer at night, okay? Somebody else mentioned already, some street was closed, maybe, I don't know what street it was. So Plain Street has become a pass-through from Walpole or Millis to 27, which when we moved here 30 years ago, there were no trucks on that street. And the street isn't built for that kind of traffic to begin with. But it's constant now, and it's narrow, and I have to say that a live collision, for instance, goes really fast. It's no longer a place where I want to walk anymore, because I don't move that quickly. So either I have to get out, or if I do, then I'm into the poison ivy on the side of the street, because the street's narrow, okay? I just also wanted to mention 2 more things. You know, when in the winter, when the snow is there and they plow, the street is even narrower. That's a big issue if we're going to have that much traffic on it. It's really times like somebody said, you have to pull over and stop to let somebody else pass. And what we need more than more housing, I think, is streetlights. That's it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any streetlights on Plain Street? No.
Are there any streetlights in Medfield? Okay. Well, thank you all for your input, very educational and helpful for us. Thank you for the traffic report, so you guys will go back and forth a bit before our next meeting, so that we can hopefully try to pin down. I'm reluctant to say resolution of the traffic issues right now, because I don't have any divine powers. What are my colleagues? But I think that would be the focus of the next meeting, and then get more into the site plan, because I think we had originally thought maybe getting into septic, and, I mean, we need to get into the stormwater and all of those issues, but the septic and the environmental are gonna be a little bit deferred. We can plan an agenda for the next meeting as we go along.
Excellent.
But the primary thing, I think, would be to use the momentum and try to deal with traffic issues.
Are we doing peer reviews for anything else? Do we do peer reviews for stormwater and,
Yeah, that's in the process now. We
Okay.
should have a letter over by the end of next week.
okay,
We kind of keep traffic and the civil separate, because
okay.
they're usually two different
Right.
consultants. So-
That's why we decided to start with traffic tonight,
Sure.
because we'd probably have enough time. And I sort of had in my mind, I didn't have to announce it because it worked out well, but I had in my mind sort of a 9 o'clock curfew on these things, because everybody's out late, and particularly in person, a lot of these folks have a distance to go to get home. And we all have to go to dark scenic ways.
Mr. Chairman?
So, hold, folks, just, if you're gonna stay, fine. If you wanna leave, we're gonna just schedule the next meeting and, talk about a site visit.
And if you haven't signed in, before you leave, please sign up the sign-up sheet. It'll just be helpful for us keeping track.
But just keep the conversation to a minimum so that we can keep going up here. Yes,
Simple question, when is the next meeting scheduled for?
yeah, the next meeting. Give me that gavel. Anybody seen the big gavel over here? The next, folks, the next session of the hearing, which will be the next meeting, is on Monday, April 28th, okay? So almost 4 weeks from now.
On
We
Zoom?
schedule that so we could,
On Zoom.
excuse me?
On Zoom.
Yes, and it's going to be on Zoom. It will not be in person at all,
At 6 p.m.
okay?
6 p.m.
So it's not a hybrid, it's just strictly Zoom.
Strictly Zoom. Make it real easy. And that'll be on the 28th at 6 o'clock on Zoom. Okay, I'm away most of the month of May, so that's why we wanted to try to get one in by the end of April and keep things moving along. Yes,
Quick question. So I don't know whether we'll have the opportunity between those dates, but so with your permission, the engineers can be discussing between themselves,
Absolutely.
whatever they can work out between themselves.
not only our permission, our encouragement
Good, okay.
to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. The other matter is scheduling a site visit, which we kind of took a poll of our board and Steve for availability and came up with, wrote it down. Give it to me.
April 10th.
Yeah, thank you.
9 a.m.
Next Thursday, April 10th, 9 a.m. Steve, I think you had some restriction or concern with that.
Yeah, it's open to any town, the town board and town employees, but not, the general public is not.
But not to the general public on the site. Okay,
That's my standard protocol when it comes to site visits.
okay,
With boards.
right.
Nothing particular about
So,
this.
and that's an agreeable date.
Liability for the owner of the land and whatnot.
So can we go into the property and park in there for the site visit?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, drive right in.
So
Nobody's living, there's no one living at the site.
Okay.
So the site visit will be on, for the board and any other town boards, but it is not open to
Yeah, it's not a
Public.
public meeting.
from the library. Okay,
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, and your consultants as well, correct?
Yes, That's fine.
Yeah, the consultant.
Not that I plan on going,
Yeah,
but,
Right.
but Steve may.
Steve will probably.
Oh, you better bring the coffee.
And we post that as a meeting.
Yes.
Did we bring donuts one? I think we brought donuts for one of the meetings. I know Ben.
Yeah, yes, I think he did.
It's the last time I had a donut.
Is the site somewhat marked at this point so that we'll know where things are?
I pulled it up.
No, so we don't have anything like marked, like we don't have any staked out as far as the houses go. The wetland flags are there, but you'll have.
Well, I mean, the wetlands and some of that would be.
Yeah, you can see the flags. That's
We
all.
just figured it was good to get a visual earlier on in the process.
flags, there'll be numbers so you can look, you can kind of get where you're at.
The good news, like, we didn't get to this, but a lot of the site is already cleared, you know what I mean? So the vegetation that we're going to be removing for the homes and the infrastructure isn't like, it's not clear cutting the 6 acres of land. It's all pastures and driveway and existing homes. There's going to be some tree removal back there and some clearing to fit the houses, but it's a open site that you can walk around. And in the woods, you can even walk around. You know, it's not like you can't go in the pond or the wetlands, but the woods aren't like briar patches and stuff like
Wear
that.
boots,
Very-
check for ticks.
It's an old growth forest, so there's not a lot of underbrush.
Yeah, in the mass housing visit, we were able to walk.
It will also give us a chance to, from the street, see the sidelines.
Yeah, that's probably the most.
And just for clarification, in terms of members of the public, obviously they're allowed on a public street.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, for that part of the site visit, but that the general public cannot go onto the lot itself.
Correct.
Okay,
When you do go there, I mean, we'll be there first, but you'll have to drive up the driveway to park because you won't,
Yeah.
don't pull off, just go up to the
Right.
parking area and then we can walk back. Or you
Okay.
can walk back.
Mr. Chair,
Good.
the other commission members who might be interested in joining, we also join, correct? Like
Yes.
members of the Conservation Commission.
yes, sure. Yeah, any town board.
I know, it's just,
We've been out there with them.
But Maria, again, if they're gonna have a quorum, then they're gonna have to post it.
yes, I just want to,
We'll post ours.
yes, we will post ours, and I will let them know just that it's an extended invitation, if they're gonna have quorum post.
And just for anyone who's still listening, the site visit, there's absolutely no discussion of anything substantive.
Right.
It's really just to see the site, so nothing can happen.
And nothing.
It's not an open meeting per se.
I haven't been out there in a while, but nothing's changed. We haven't done any kind of, you know, taken the house down and changed any topography. It's all the same.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave the house up probably until the very end. We're not gonna take it.
Okay.
We had a tenant there for a while, but they moved to a different apartment.
That day works for you, Steve, right?
Yeah, I believe Maria sent out the.
Yeah, send out the,
So,
yeah, good. All right,
Yeah, we look forward to it.
yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate
right.
it.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, just clarify, you have to formally vote to continue, okay.
The dates are.
It's not our first full meeting.
I know. So, you know, sometimes it can get lost in the shuffle. I just,
Come on, I'm getting tired. So I will entertain a motion first to continue the hearing to Monday, April 28th at 6 PM solely via Zoom. Someone could just say so moved.
So moved.
All right. Jared Gustafson makes the motion. We have a second.
Christine Barton, second.
Okay, all in favor. We'll do this by roll call just because we've been doing it.
Jared Gustafson, aye.
Christine Barton, aye.
Jack Nicholas, aye. And Bill will be there too. Yeah. And how about a motion to close the meeting?
Jared Gustafson making a motion to close the meeting.
to adjourn.
Adjourn, yeah.
To adjourn.
No, they may not close.
We can't close?
No, we're not closing. the
Yes,
meeting.
but you're adjourning the hearing, you're not closing it. Just,
Adjourning the hearing or the meeting?
you're adjourning the meeting. Yes.
Adjourning the meeting. See, he's
Jared
getting
Gustafson
tired.
making a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Christine Barton, seconds.
All in favor? Jack Nicholas, aye. The meeting is adjourned.
I love your style.